The pregnancy test fell from Valeria Romano's trembling hands, clattering against marble as her carefully planned escape crumbled to dust. For 2 years, she'd endured a marriage colder than winter steel, surviving on silence and loneliness while her husband ruled his empire with ruthless precision. Tonight, she was supposed to disappear forever. But the two pink lines staring back at her changed everything. She was carrying the child of a man who'd never loved her, or so she believed. What Valeria didn't know was that Adrian Vercelli's coldness had always been a lie, and the truth would either save them both or destroy everything. Want to see how this story unfolds? Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale travels. The penthouse overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline should have felt like a dream. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting. Designer furniture filled rooms large enough to echo, and every surface gleamed with the kind of wealth most people only imagined. But to Valeria Romano, it felt like the most beautiful cage ever built. She stood at those windows now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, her reflection ghostly against the darkening glass. 26 years old, stunningly beautiful with dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders and eyes the color of warm honey, she looked every inch the successful mafia wife. The emerald silk dress she wore cost more than most people earned in a month. Diamond earrings, a gift from her husband on their first anniversary, caught the fading light. But beneath the expensive facade, Valeria was drowning. 2 years. 730 days of waking up beside a man who barely looked at her. 730 nights of eating dinner in silence, of sleeping in the same bed as someone who felt like a stranger, of wondering how love could die so completely without ever being properly buried. Adrian Vercelli. Even his name carried weight in the shadows of New York's underworld. At 34, he commanded an empire built on power, precision, and fear. He was devastatingly handsome in that dangerous way that made smart women nervous. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that could strip away pretense with a single glance, and in presence that filled every room he entered. When he walked into restaurants, conversations stopped. When he made decisions, grown men trembled. But the man who terrified criminals and commanded absolute loyalty was the same man who barely spoke to his wife. Valeria pressed her palm against the cool glass, remembering the man she'd married. That Adrian had been different, still dangerous, still powerful, but warm in ways that made her feel alive. He'd courted her with an intensity that left her breathless, appearing at the small cafe where she worked with flowers and that devastating smile. He'd made her feel seen, cherished, essential. The wedding had been beautiful, small, intimate, perfect. She'd believed in fairy tales that day, standing beside him in her simple white dress, promising forever to a man who looked at her like she was his entire world. The fairy tale lasted exactly 3 months. The change was subtle at first. Adrian started coming home later, speaking less, retreating into whatever darkness lived behind those unreadable eyes. Conversations that once flowed easily became stilted, forced. The warmth that had drawn her to him cooled degree by degree until she was living with someone who treated her like an expensive piece of furniture. Necessary for appearances, but ultimately decorative. She'd tried everything. Romantic dinners he barely touched. Conversations he dismissed with monosyllables. Reaching for him in the night only to feel him pull away, murmuring about being tired, about work, about anything except the truth. Eventually, Valeria stopped trying. She learned to play the role expected of her, the perfect mafia wife, who smiled at parties, stayed silent during business discussions, and pretended her heart wasn't breaking behind the designer clothes and flawless makeup. "Mrs. Vercelli?" The voice of Maria, their housekeeper, broke through her thoughts. "Will Mr. Vercelli be joining you for dinner?" Valeria didn't turn from the window. "Has he ever?" Maria's uncomfortable silence was answer enough. The older woman had worked for Adrian for years, long enough to witness the slow death of the marriage. "I'll set the table for one, then." "Thank you, Maria." Alone again, Valeria finally allowed herself to acknowledge the decision that had been building for months. The choice that terrified and liberated her in equal measure. She was going to leave Adrian. The thought should have brought panic, but instead she felt something close to relief. She'd been researching for weeks now. Small apartments in Boston, job opportunities, ways to disappear cleanly. She'd been secretly funneling money from the household account Adrian never monitored, building an escape fund one careful withdrawal at a time. Tomorrow, she'd planned to tell her best friend Sophie about the plan. Sophie, who'd been warning her about Adrian from the beginning, who'd watched Valeria transform from vibrant to hollow, would help. Together, they'd finalize the details. 1 month. That's all she needed. 1 month to prepare, to plan, to gather the courage to walk away from the only man she'd ever loved, even if he no longer loved her back. The sound of the penthouse door opening made her tense. Adrian was home early, a rarity that happened maybe twice a month. She heard his footsteps, the familiar rhythm of expensive shoes against marble, heading toward his study as always. Not toward her, never toward her. Valeria closed her eyes, fighting back the sting of tears she'd promised herself she wouldn't shed anymore. She'd cried enough for this marriage. Tonight, she just felt tired. Valeria. His voice, deep and commanding even when quiet, startled her. She turned to find Adrian standing in the doorway of the living room, still wearing his black suit, looking every inch the powerful boss he was. Even now, even drowning in loneliness and hurt, she couldn't deny how devastatingly attractive he was. "You're home early," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "We need to talk." 4 words that made her heart plummet. In 2 years of near silence, Adrian suddenly needed to talk? She studied his face, trying to read the expression there, but he'd become a master at revealing nothing. About what? He moved into the room with that predatory grace that had once made her pulse race. Now it just made her wary. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to touch, but of course he didn't. "About us." The laugh that escaped her was bitter, brittle. "Us? There is no us, Adrian. There hasn't been for a long time." Something flickered in his dark eyes. Surprise, maybe pain, but it vanished too quickly to identify. "Valeria, no." The word came out sharper than intended, but 2 years of silence had built up an enormous pressure. "You don't get to suddenly want to talk. Not after 730 days of treating me like I'm invisible. Not after turning our marriage into whatever cold, empty thing this has become." "You've been counting the days?" His voice was strained. "I've had nothing else to do." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm apartment. "Do you have any idea what it's like, Adrian? Living with someone who can't stand to look at you? Who flinches when you reach for them? Who treats you like an obligation instead of a wife?" "I never flinched. You did worse. You disappeared while standing right in front of me." The tears came now, hot and angry. "I married a man who made me feel alive, who looked at me like I mattered. That man died 3 months after our wedding, and I've been living with his ghost ever since." Adrian's jaw tightened, the only crack in his controlled facade. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me." The words exploded from her, 2 years of hurt and confusion and loneliness pouring out. "Tell me what I did wrong. Tell me why you stopped loving me. Tell me something, anything, except this endless, suffocating silence." "I never stopped loving you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and devastating. Valeria stared at him, certain she'd misheard, but Adrian was looking at her now with an intensity she hadn't seen in 2 years. "What?" she whispered. "I never stopped loving you," he repeated, and this time she heard the rawness in his voice. "Not for a single day. Not for a single moment." "That's a lie." She shook her head, backing away from him. "You can't love someone and treat them the way you've treated me." "You're right." Adrian moved closer, and for once she didn't retreat. "But I can love someone so much that it terrifies me. I can love someone so deeply that I'd do anything to protect them, even if it means breaking both our hearts." "What are you talking about?" He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so unlike his usual control that it stopped her cold. "Do you know what happens in my world when people discover a weakness? When they find something, someone you care about? Adrian, they use it against you." His voice was hard now, edged with something dark and bitter. "They threaten it, hurt it, destroy it. In my world, love isn't a strength, Valeria. It's a target painted on everything you care about." Understanding dawned slowly, horribly. "You pushed me away to protect me? From the moment we married, you became the most dangerous vulnerability in my life." He was close now, close enough that she could see the pain etched in the lines around his eyes. "Every enemy I have, every rival looking for leverage, every ambitious bastard trying to take what's mine. They all would have used you against me. So you made them think I didn't matter. Her voice was barely audible. I made them think you were an arrangement, a trophy wife I kept for appearances but felt nothing for. Adrian's hands clenched at his sides. I was cold to you in public, distant at home. I made sure that anyone watching would believe our marriage was empty, that hurting you would accomplish nothing. You hurt me instead. Tears streamed down her face now. You broke my heart to save it? I know. The words seemed torn from him. I know what I did to you, what I took from us. Every day I saw you pulling further away, becoming a shadow of the woman I married. Every night I wanted to reach for you, to hold you, to tell you the truth. But I couldn't risk it. One slip, one moment of weakness, and you'd become a target. Valeria sank onto the nearby sofa, her legs unable to support her anymore. 2 years. 2 years of suffering based on a lie. No, based on a terrible, misguided attempt at protection. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. Adrian's expression shifted, becoming guarded again. Because I know you're planning to leave me. The words hit like a physical blow. How? Someone sent me a message this afternoon. Anonymous. Detailed. He pulled out his phone, showed her a text that made her blood run cold. It described her research, her secret savings, her plans, everything. Someone's been watching you, Valeria. Someone knows exactly what you're doing. Fear replaced the anger and confusion. Who? I don't know yet. Adrian's voice took on the cold, dangerous edge she'd heard him use with business associates. But I will find out. This is insane, so Valeria stood again, pacing. Someone's been spying on me? Reporting to you? Why? Because in my world, information is currency. He moved to the window, looking out at the city he controlled from the shadows. And your intention's to leave me. That's valuable information to anyone who wants to destabilize my position. Your position? She laughed bitterly. Everything comes back to power and control with you. No. He turned to face her, and the raw emotion in his expression stopped her cold. Everything comes back to keeping you alive. You want to leave? Fine. I'll let you go. I'll give you enough money to disappear anywhere in the world, set you up so you never have to worry about anything again. But I need to know who's watching you first, because if they're tracking your movements now, they'll follow you when you leave. The logic was sound, but Valeria's mind was reeling from too many revelations at once. I can't process this. 2 years of silence, and now you're telling me it was all some elaborate protection scheme? That you still love me, but pushed me away for my own good? It's... She stopped, a wave of dizziness washing over her. The room tilted slightly, and she grabbed the back of the sofa for support. Valeria? Adrian was at her side instantly, his hand on her arm, the first time he'd touched her in months. What's wrong? I don't know. I just feel... Another wave hit, stronger this time, accompanied by a rolling nausea that made her stomach clench. Adrian guided her back to the sofa, his face concerned. When's the last time you ate? This morning, I think? She closed her eyes, trying to will the nausea away. Maybe yesterday. I don't remember. Jesus, Valeria. There was worry in his voice now, genuine and unguarded. Maria! The housekeeper appeared quickly. Yes, Mr. Vercelli? Get some water and crackers. Now. He knelt in front of Valeria, and she could feel his eyes searching her face. How long have you been feeling sick? A few days. She opened her eyes, found him closer than he'd been in 2 years. It comes and goes. I thought it was just stress. Or it could be... Adrian stopped abruptly, his expression shifting from concern to something else entirely, something that looked almost like fear. Could be what? He stood, pacing now, his mind clearly racing. When he turned back to her, his voice was carefully controlled. When was your last period? The question caught her completely off guard. What? Your cycle, Valeria. When was it? She tried to think back, but the past few weeks had been such a blur of planning and secret preparations. I don't know. A few weeks ago? Maybe longer? How much longer? I don't know. The sharpness in her voice came from confusion, not anger. Why does it matter? Adrian crossed to the bar, poured himself a drink with hands that weren't quite steady. Because nausea, dizziness, missed periods, those are symptoms of something very specific. Understanding hit her like a freight train. No. It's possible. No. She stood, even though the movement made her dizzy again. That's not possible. We barely... 3 months ago, Adrian said quietly. Your birthday. You'd had wine with dinner. You came to me and I... He stopped, jaw clenching. I wasn't strong enough to push you away that night. Valeria remembered. She'd been feeling reckless, lonely, desperate for any connection with the stranger she'd married. The wine had given her courage to slip into his bed, to kiss him, to reach for the man she'd lost. And Adrian, for one night only, had let his walls down. The next morning, he'd been colder than ever, and she'd sworn never to humiliate herself like that again. One night, she whispered, 3 months ago, is enough. Maria returned with water and crackers, took one look at the tension in the room, and wisely retreated. Valeria sank back onto the sofa, her mind spinning with impossible calculations. Pregnant. She might be pregnant with Adrian Vercelli's child. I need to know for sure, she said. Adrian was already moving, pulling out his phone. I'll have my doctor here in 20 minutes. No. She held up a hand. No doctors, no staff, no one else. Not until we know. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. There's a pharmacy 3 blocks from here. I'll go myself. You? The great Adrian Vercelli buying a pregnancy test? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. For you? Yes. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone with thoughts that wouldn't stop racing. Pregnant. The word felt foreign, impossible. She'd imagined having children someday, but not like this. Not in a broken marriage with a man who'd spent 2 years pushing her away. And yet, if Adrian was telling the truth, if he'd been protecting her all along, then everything changed. The cold distance, the emotional abandonment, it was all a lie built to keep her safe. But could she believe that? Could she forgive 2 years of loneliness because the motivation was love instead of indifference? Valeria pressed a hand to her stomach, wondering if life was already growing there. A child who would be born into this complicated, dangerous world. A child who would inherit Adrian's power and enemies. A child who might be the only real thing in their marriage of shadows and lies. Adrian returned faster than seemed possible, slightly breathless, carrying a small pharmacy bag. He'd gone himself, just as promised. No drivers, no security, just him. For her. I got 3 different brands, he said, pulling out the boxes. Just to be sure. Valeria took them with shaking hands. Adrian, don't. He ran a hand through his hair again, that tell of nervousness she'd almost forgotten he had. Whatever the result is, we'll deal with it. Together. Together, she repeated, the word strange after so long apart. She walked to the bathroom on unsteady legs, Adrian's eyes on her back the entire way. Inside, she stared at her reflection, pale, scared, uncertain. The woman looking back at her was about to learn something that would change everything. 5 minutes later, she emerged holding all 3 tests, her face pale, her hands trembling. Adrian stood immediately. What? She held them out, the white plastic sticks damning in their uniformity. Every single one showed the same result. 2 pink lines. Positive. She was pregnant with Adrian Vercelli's child. Adrian stared at the tests, his expression cycling through shock, fear, and something that might have been wonder. When he finally looked up at her, his eyes were dark with emotion. Valeria. His phone buzzed, then again, then continuously, a rapid-fire series of messages that made his expression go cold and dangerous. He pulled it out, read the screen, and every trace of warmth vanished from his face. What is it? Valeria asked, fear creeping up her spine. Adrian showed her the phone. A series of messages, all from the same blocked number. Congratulations on the pregnancy. Such a vulnerable time for a woman. Especially one carrying the child of the city's most dangerous man. So many things could go wrong. Be careful, Mrs. Vercelli. Valeria's hands went instinctively to her stomach, protective and terrified. Someone knows. Already. Someone's been watching us for a while. Adrian's voice was steel. The person who told me about your escape plans. The person who somehow knows about the pregnancy minutes after we do. Someone has eyes on us, Valeria. Who would do this? His laugh was dark, bitter. In my world? Take your pick. Rival families looking for leverage, old enemies wanting revenge, ambitious lieutenants ready to exploit any weakness. He moved to the window, scanning the buildings across the street with the practiced eye of someone always watching for threats. Whoever it is, they just made the biggest mistake of their life. What are you going to do? Adrian turned to her, and the man standing there was someone she'd never fully seen before. Not the cold husband, not the passionate lover from their early days, but the ruthless crime boss who'd built an empire on calculated violence and absolute control. I'm going to protect what's mine, he said simply. You and our child. You're my family, and I don't care what I have to do or who I have to destroy, but nobody threatens my family. The possessive intensity in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, for the first time in 2 years, Valeria felt something close to safe. Where do we start? She asked. We? He shook his head. No, you're not getting involved in this. Too late. She moved to stand beside him, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach again. Someone's already made me involved. Someone's threatening our child. So tell me, where do we start? Adrian looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Respect. You're not the same woman I married. No, she agreed. That woman died somewhere in the past 2 years. You're stuck with whoever's left. A real smile crossed his face, brief but genuine. I think I like whoever's left even better. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time the message made his entire body go rigid. What? Valeria demanded. He showed her the screen. Running won't save you. There's nowhere you can hide. But try anyway. It makes the hunt more interesting. Pack a bag, Adrian said, his voice brooking no argument. We're leaving, now. Where are we going? Somewhere I control every entrance, every exit, every person who comes within a mile of you. He was already moving, making calls, activating whatever security protocols he had in place. Somewhere I can keep you safe while I hunt down whoever thinks they can threaten my wife and child. Within 20 minutes, they were in Adrian's car, speeding through the night toward an unknown destination. Valeria watched the city lights blur past, her hand still resting protectively over her stomach. Everything had changed in the span of a few hours. This morning, she'd been planning her escape from a loveless marriage. Tonight, she was fleeing into the darkness with a husband who claimed he'd loved her all along, carrying a child that made her both precious and vulnerable. Adrian, she said softly. Yes? Tell me the truth. About everything. No more protection through distance. No more lies to keep me safe. If we're doing this, if we're bringing a child into your world, I need to know what we're facing. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Finally, he nodded. When we get where we're going, I'll tell you everything. Every enemy, every threat, every dark corner of the life I've built. You deserve to know what you're fighting for. And what am I fighting for? Adrian glanced at her, and in the darkness of the car, his eyes held a warmth she'd almost forgotten existed. For us, he said. For the family we could be. If I stop being a coward, and you can find it in yourself to forgive me. Valeria didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. Too much had been revealed, too many wounds still raw. But as the car carried them into the night, away from the city and toward whatever came next, she felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope. Dangerous, fragile, terrifying hope. Behind them, the Manhattan skyline disappeared into the darkness. Ahead, the road stretched endlessly, leading them toward a future neither of them could predict. But for the first time since their wedding day, Adrian and Valeria Vercelli were facing it together. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was watching, waiting, planning their next move in a game neither of them fully understood yet. The hunt had begun. The safe house materialized from the darkness like something out of a dream or a fortress. 3 hours north of Manhattan, deep in the Adirondack Mountains, the compound sat perched on a hillside surrounded by dense forest. High walls, surveillance cameras, armed guards at every checkpoint. Adrian navigated through the security layers with practiced ease, each gate opening at his approach, each guard nodding recognition. Valeria watched it all with growing unease. How long have you had this place? 4 years. Since before we met. Adrian pulled the car into an underground garage, the heavy door closing behind them with a sound like a vault ceiling. I've never brought anyone here. Not business associates, not family, no one. Why now? He turned off the engine, sat in the sudden silence for a moment. Because this is the only place in the world where I know every person, every entrance, every potential threat. Because I built it specifically for a moment like this, when I'd need to protect something more valuable than my own life. The weight of those words settled between them as they exited the car. The garage was immaculate, clinical, housing 3 other vehicles and what looked like enough security equipment to stage a small invasion. Adrian grabbed their bags, then led her to an elevator that required both a keycard and thumbprint to activate. How many people know about this place? Valeria asked as they ascended. 6. 5 of them are here right now, part of the security team. The 6th is Marco, my most trusted lieutenant. He's the only person outside these walls who knows this location exists. And you trust him completely? Adrian's jaw tightened. I did. Until tonight, I would have bet my life on his loyalty. Now, I'm not certain of anything. The elevator opened into a great room that took Valeria's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the dark forest, though she suspected they were bulletproof and probably had some kind of protective shutters. The interior was surprisingly warm. Leather furniture, a massive stone fireplace, rich wood accents. It felt less like a military bunker and more like a luxury cabin. There are 6 bedrooms upstairs, Adrian said, setting down their bags. The master suite has its own bathroom and sitting area. You should rest. I'm not tired. It was a lie. Exhaustion pulled at her bones. But Valeria wasn't ready to be alone with her thoughts. You promised me the truth. Everything. Adrian studied her for a long moment, then nodded. He moved to the bar, poured himself whiskey, held up the bottle in question. She shook her head. The baby, she had to remember the baby now, and he replaced it, returning with water for her instead. They sat on opposite ends of the leather sofa, the same careful distance they'd maintained for 2 years, old habits dying hard. Where do you want me to start? Adrian asked. The beginning. How did you become this person? The one who needs secret fortresses and armed guards? He leaned back, shadows playing across his face. I was born into it. My father ran the Vercelli family before me. Smaller operation than what I built, but still powerful, still dangerous. I watched him navigate that world my entire childhood, saw what it cost him. What did it cost? Everything that mattered. Adrian's voice went dark. My mother died when I was 12. Car accident, they said. But my father knew better. He'd made enemies, shown weakness by loving her too openly. They killed her to hurt him. Valeria's hand instinctively covered her stomach. Adrian, he was never the same after, Adrian continued. Became harder, colder. Taught me that in our world, love is a liability. That the moment you care about someone, you paint a target on their back. He died when I was 22, heart attack brought on by decades of stress and violence. Left me an empire built on blood and the lesson that attachment equals vulnerability. So you decided never to attach to anyone. Until you. He looked at her directly. You weren't supposed to happen, Valeria. I had rules, systems. I never stayed with the same woman twice. Never let anyone close enough to matter. And then I walked into that cafe, and you smiled at me like I was just a man instead of a monster, and every rule I'd ever made shattered. She remembered that day. He'd come in during the afternoon rush, stood out immediately among the students and freelancers with their laptops. Dark suit, dangerous eyes, completely out of place. She'd served him coffee, made some joke about him looking too serious for a Tuesday. He'd smiled, actually smiled, and asked when her shift ended. I tried to stay away, Adrian said. After that first coffee, I told myself it was a mistake. But I came back the next day, and the next. I couldn't stop myself. You seemed so confident, like you knew exactly what you were doing. I was terrified. The admission seemed to cost him, because for the first time in my life, I wanted something more than power or control. I wanted you, and I knew that wanting you would put you in danger. But you pursued me anyway. Because I'm selfish. His hands clenched around his glass. I thought I could have both, you and the safety. I thought if I was careful enough, smart enough, I could protect you while keeping you close. The first 3 months of our marriage, I believed that lie. What changed? Adrian stood, moved to the windows, stared out at the darkness. Someone sent me a photograph. You, leaving the apartment alone, going to the grocery store. Ordinary, innocent. Except written on the back was a single sentence. She'd be easy to take. Horror crawled up Valeria's spine. When was this? 3 months and 2 days after our wedding. His voice was flat, controlled. The next week I received 3 more. You at the gym, at lunch with Sophie, walking through Central Park, all with similar messages. So vulnerable, so unprotected. What a shame if something happened. Why didn't you tell me? Because telling you would have made it real, would have transferred the fear to you. He turned back to face her. I hired additional security instead. Had you followed everywhere by trained operatives, investigated who sent the photos, came up empty. Whoever it was had covered their tracks perfectly. So you pushed me away to make me seem unimportant. I made sure that anyone watching our marriage would think it was hollow, that you were arm candy, nothing more. I was cold in public, distant at home. I made you hate me to keep you safe. His voice cracked slightly. And it worked. The photos stopped. The threats disappeared. But I lost you in the process. Valeria's eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. You lost us both because I would have rather faced danger with you than safety without you. I know that now. Adrian crossed back to her, knelt in front of the sofa so they were eye level. I know I made the wrong choice. I was so focused on keeping you alive that I didn't consider whether you'd want to live the life I was forcing on you. But Valeria, you have to understand, I watched my father bury my mother. I've seen what happens when love becomes a weapon. I couldn't... His voice broke completely. I couldn't survive losing you that way. She reached out, her hand hovering near his face before finally making contact, fingers brushing his jaw. He closed his eyes at the touch like it pained him. So you lost me slowly instead, she whispered. Yes. They sat in that moment, 2 years of misunderstanding and hurt hanging between them. Finally, Valeria pulled her hand back. The pregnancy changes everything, she said. I know. We can't raise a child in this half-life. Either we're together, really together, or we end this completely. No more protection through distance. No more noble sacrifice. Because our baby deserves parents who are honest with each other, even when that honesty is dangerous. Adrian's dark eyes searched her face. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you want this marriage to survive, you have to let me in. All the way. The danger, the enemies, the darkness. I need to see all of it, and you need to stop treating me like I'm made of glass. She straightened her shoulders. I'm stronger than you think. Stronger than I knew I was. You're terrifying, Adrian said, but there was admiration in his voice. Good. Valeria stood, suddenly restless. Now tell me who you think is threatening us. Adrian rose as well, his mind clearly shifting gears into strategic mode. The timing is too precise to be coincidence. Someone knew about your escape plans before I did. Someone knew about the pregnancy within minutes of us finding out. That level of surveillance requires resources and access. Access to what? To us, our home, our phones, possibly our conversations. He pulled out his cell, stared at it with disgust. I'll have Marco bring clean devices tomorrow. These could be compromised. You said you trusted Marco completely. I do, but I also trusted my security team, my household staff, my business associates. Someone in my inner circle is feeding information to an enemy, either willingly or unknowingly. Valeria processed this. How many people are in your inner circle? Too many. Adrian moved to a laptop on the desk, opened it, pulled up what looked like organizational charts. I have 12 lieutenants who report directly to me. Each of them has their own crews, their own operations. Then there's the household staff, Maria, the security detail at the penthouse, the drivers. Add in the people who handle my legitimate businesses as cover. We're talking about maybe 200 people who have varying levels of access to my life. That's a lot of potential leaks, which is why I need to narrow it down. He pulled up another screen, this one showing surveillance feeds from what she recognized as their penthouse. Someone had to plant bugs or cameras to know about your plans. Maria was there all day. The security team rotates shifts. Any of them could have had access. Valeria joined him at the desk, studying the feeds. What about the pregnancy? How did they know so fast? That's what worries me most. Adrian's expression was grim. The only way they could know that quickly is if they have real-time audio surveillance in our home, which means they've been listening to everything we say. The violation of it made Valeria's skin crawl. How long? I don't know. Could be weeks, could be months. He closed the laptop. But I'm going to find out. And when I do, whoever's responsible is going to wish they'd never been born. The cold promise in his voice reminded Valeria exactly who she'd married. Not just a man, but a force of nature capable of extraordinary violence when provoked. What's our next move? She asked. Our move is you rest while I make some calls. At her protest, he held up a hand. I'm not shutting you out, but you're pregnant, exhausted, and we've had enough shocks for one night. Tomorrow, we plan together. Tonight, you sleep. Valeria wanted to argue, but another wave of exhaustion hit her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the past few hours was fading fast, leaving her hollow and drained. Fine, she conceded. But Adrian? No more secrets. When you make those calls, I want to know what you learn. Deal. He surprised her by leaning in, pressing a kiss to her forehead, the first real affection he'd shown in 2 years. Get some rest. I'll be up in a few hours. The master suite was as impressive as the rest of the house. King-size bed with soft linens, sitting area with more bulletproof windows, bathroom that could have been in a 5-star hotel. Valeria showered, standing under the hot water until her muscles relaxed, trying to process everything that had happened. She was pregnant. Her husband still loved her. Someone was threatening their child. They were hiding in a secret fortress in the mountains. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been finalizing her escape plan. When she finally crawled into bed, she expected sleep to be impossible. Instead, exhaustion claimed her immediately, dragging her down into darkness. She woke to sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory returned in a rush. The pregnancy test, the threats, the drive through the night. Valeria found Adrian in the kitchen, looking like he hadn't slept at all. 2 laptops were open on the counter, his phone beside them, pages of notes scattered around. He'd changed into jeans and a black sweater, looking more casual than she'd seen him in years. Please tell me you got some sleep, she said. He looked up, and despite the exhaustion evident in his face, his eyes warmed when they landed on her. A few hours. Coffee? Decaf, if you have it. Already made. He poured her a cup, added cream the way she liked it, a detail he'd remembered despite 2 years of distance. How are you feeling? Nauseous, but manageable. She accepted the coffee, studied the organized chaos spread across the counter. What did you learn? Adrian's expression darkened. Marco brought clean phones and swept our penthouse remotely. He found 3 listening devices, one in the living room, one in our bedroom, one in my study. All high-end military-grade equipment placed within the last 6 weeks. Valeria's hand trembled slightly, coffee sloshing in the cup. 6 weeks. Someone's been listening to us for 6 weeks. Which means they know everything. Your conversations with Sophie about leaving, my business discussions, our fight last night. He pulled up security footage on one of the laptops. I've been reviewing who had access to the apartment during that time frame. The list is shorter than I expected. How short? 15 people, Maria and the other household staff, the regular security detail, a tech consultant I brought in to upgrade the home network. He highlighted names on a list. I've had Marco investigating each of them overnight. Most check out clean, been with me for years, families I know, no suspicious financial activity. Most? 3 anomalies. Adrian pulled up files. First, Carlos, one of the security guards. He's been with me for 2 years, but Marco discovered he's been making deposits to an offshore account. Small amounts, but regular. How small? $5,000 a month. Not enough to live on, but enough to suggest someone's paying him for something. Valeria set down her coffee. You think he planted the bugs? Possibly, but his access to the penthouse is limited. His perimeter security rarely comes inside. He could have planted the living room device when I had that reception in September, but the bedroom and study would have been harder. Who else? Second is the tech consultant, David Chen. Came highly recommended, did excellent work on the network upgrade, but Marco can't find any record of him before 3 years ago. No previous employment, no digital footprint, nothing. False identity? Or someone who's very good at erasing their past? Adrian's jaw tightened, which in my world usually means intelligence services or deep cover operative. And the third? Adrian hesitated, and Valeria saw real pain cross his face. Maria. No. The word came out sharp. Maria's worked for you for what, 8 years? She's been nothing but kind to me. I know, and I don't want to believe it either, but Marco found something. He pulled up bank records. Her daughter, Lucia, lives in California, received a payment of $50,000 6 weeks ago. Anonymous donor, no explanation. Maria never mentioned it. Valeria's mind reeled. Sweet maternal Maria who'd tried to make her feel welcome when Adrian wouldn't. Maria who'd witnessed the slow death of their marriage and offered quiet sympathy. Maria who'd been in the penthouse every single day for the past 6 weeks. There could be innocent explanations, Valeria said, but even she heard the doubt in her voice. Could be. Adrian closed the laptop, which is why I'm not making any moves until I have proof. But Valeria, you need to understand something. In my world, trust is a luxury I can't afford. Anyone could be compromised. Anyone could be the threat. Even Marco? Even Marco. The admission clearly cost him. Which is why I had him bring the clean phones but didn't tell him everything. Why this location remains secret. Why you and I are going to handle this ourselves until we know who we can trust. A knock at the front door made them both tense. Adrian's hand went immediately to the gun she hadn't noticed tucked at his waist. Stay here, he commanded. But Valeria followed him to the security monitors, watching as he checked the cameras. A woman stood on the porch, early 30s, athletic build, holding what looked like a medical bag. Who is that? Valeria asked. Dr. Sarah Chen. No relation to David Chen. I checked. Adrian's posture relaxed slightly. I called her last night. She's a private physician I've used for sensitive situations. Completely discreet. You brought a doctor? You're pregnant. You need prenatal care. And I want someone I trust to confirm everything's okay with you and the baby. He moved toward the door. Sarah's been on my payroll for 5 years. She's never betrayed a confidence. Dr. Chen was professional, efficient, and asked no questions about why they were meeting at a secret mountain compound. She examined Valeria thoroughly, drew blood for tests, and confirmed what the drugstore tests had already revealed. Based on your last period, you're approximately 12 weeks along, Dr. Chen said, making notes on her tablet. I'll have the blood work done by tomorrow, but everything looks healthy. You're experiencing normal first trimester symptoms. The nausea should start improving in the next few weeks. 12 weeks? 3 months. Right around the time Adrian had said, when wine and loneliness had driven her to his bed for one desperate night. When will we know the sex? Valeria asked. Around 20 weeks, if you want to find out. Dr. Chen smiled. But for now, focus on rest, hydration, and avoiding stress as much as possible. Adrian made a sound that might have been a laugh. Stress, right. After Dr. Chen left, with instructions to call if anything changed, Adrian and Valeria found themselves alone again. The confirmation of the pregnancy made it real in a way the plastic tests hadn't. There was a life growing inside her, their child, conceived in a moment of desperate connection in a dying marriage. 12 weeks, Valeria said softly. I've been carrying our baby for 3 months and didn't even know. Adrian moved behind her, close but not touching. I'm sorry you had to find out like this, with threats and danger instead of joy. That's your world, though, isn't it? She turned to face him. Danger is just part of the package. It doesn't have to be your world. His voice was quiet. I meant what I said last night. If you want to leave, really leave, not just plan it. I'll make it happen. Set you up somewhere safe, far from me and everything I represent. You and the baby would be protected, provided for. And you'd what? Stay here alone fighting enemies in the shadows? If it kept you safe, yes. Valeria studied his face, saw the genuine offer there. He would let her go, would sacrifice his own happiness to give her safety, the same twisted logic that had driven him to push her away for 2 years. No, she said firmly. Valeria, no more martyrdom, Adrian, no more noble sacrifice. She stepped closer. We're having this baby together, as a family, which means we fight this threat together and we figure out how to make this marriage work together. I'm not running, and you're not pushing me away again. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Hope, fear, relief, all mixed together. You're sure? I've never been more sure of anything. And as she said it, Valeria realized it was true. Despite everything, the danger, the lies, the 2 years of loneliness, she wasn't ready to give up on them. Not when she finally understood why he'd pulled away. Not when there was still a chance to build something real. Then we do this right. Adrian's voice was rough with emotion. Full partnership. No more secrets, no more protection through distance. You want in? You're in completely. Deal. He pulled her into his arms then, the first real embrace in 2 years, and Valeria melted into it. His heart thundered against her ear, his arms strong and solid around her. This was what she'd been missing, not the luxury or the status, but this connection, this feeling of being held by someone who actually cared. I've missed you, Adrian murmured into her hair. Every single day I've missed you. Then don't let me go again. Never. They stood like that for a long moment, two broken people trying to find their way back to each other. Finally, reluctantly, they pulled apart. So what's our plan? Valeria asked. Adrian's expression shifted back to strategic mode. We need to identify who planted those bugs and who they're working for. Once we know that, we can neutralize the threat. How do we find out? We set a trap. He moved back to the laptops, pulled up surveillance feeds again. Someone's listening to those devices, waiting for useful information. We give them exactly what they want to hear. Valeria caught on quickly. We feed them false information through the bugs. See who takes the bait. Exactly. But we need to be smart about it. The information has to be valuable enough to act on, but not so valuable that we actually put ourselves at risk. He started typing, formulating a plan. We'll use the penthouse bugs to plant a story. Maybe that I'm meeting with a rival family to discuss territory. Give a specific time and location. And see who shows up? More specifically, see who tells whom. If Carlos is the leak, he'll report to whoever's paying him. Same with David Chen or Maria. We track the information flow, identify the source. What if whoever's listening doesn't take the bait? Then we try something else. But people get greedy, especially when they think they have the upper hand. Someone's been watching us for weeks, learning our patterns, building their case. They won't be able to resist intel about a major meeting. It was manipulative, calculating, and probably dangerous. It was also the first real plan they had. When do we start? Valeria asked. Tonight. I'll have Marco arrange everything from his end, book a private room at a restaurant, make it look legitimate. Then we return to the penthouse, have a loud argument about my business dealings where the bugs can hear everything, plant the story. And then? Then we come back here and wait to see who takes the bait. Adrian pulled her close again. But I need you to promise me something. What? If things go wrong, if the threat escalates or if I tell you to run, you do it. No arguments, no questions. You take the clean phone, you follow the escape protocols I'm about to teach you, and you disappear until I make things safe again. Valeria wanted to argue, to insist she wouldn't abandon him, but she had more than herself to think about now. Her hand moved to her stomach, to the life growing there. I promise, she said, but only if things go wrong. Until then, we're in this together. Together, Adrian agreed. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Adrian walked her through the compound's security system, showed her the escape routes, taught her how to use the clean phones and the encrypted apps that would let them communicate if separated. He was thorough, patient, treating her like a partner instead of a fragile thing to be protected. As sunset painted the mountain sky in shades of orange and purple, they prepared to return to Manhattan, back to the beautiful cage where someone had been watching their every move, back to set a trap for an enemy they couldn't yet see. Ready? Adrian asked as they climbed into the car. Valeria looked back at the compound, this fortress built to protect something precious. Then she looked at Adrian, at the man who'd loved her enough to break both their hearts trying to keep her safe. Ready, she said. The drive back to the city felt different than the panicked flight north. This time they had a plan, a purpose. This time they were united instead of broken. When they finally pulled into the underground garage of their building, Adrian turned to her one more time. "Last chance to change your mind," he said. "Once we walk back into that penthouse, we're committed to this path." Valeria thought about the child growing inside her, about the marriage she'd almost abandoned, about the man beside her who'd made terrible choices out of misguided love. "I'm not changing my mind," she said. "Let's catch whoever's threatening our family." They rode the elevator up in tense silence, both preparing for the performance they were about to give. When the doors opened onto their penthouse, everything looked exactly as they'd left it, beautiful, expensive, hollow. Except now they knew it was compromised. Somewhere in these rooms, devices were listening to every word. Adrian closed the door behind them, then immediately launched into the planned argument, his voice loud enough to carry. "I don't care what Marco thinks. The meeting with the Castellanos is happening tomorrow night, and that's final." Valeria picked up her cue. "You're being reckless, Adrian. Meeting with them now, after everything that's happened?" "It's business, Valeria. Something you've never understood." They continued the charade, painting a picture of a secret meeting at a specific restaurant, at a specific time. Information too good for their enemy to ignore. When it was done, when the false intelligence had been planted, they retreated to separate rooms as they'd planned, keeping up the appearance of a fractured marriage even while working together. But hours later, when the apartment was dark and silent, Adrian slipped into her room, climbed into bed beside her, pulled her close. "Tomorrow we'll see who takes the bait," he whispered. "And then? Then we end this. Whatever it takes, whoever's behind it, we end this threat so our child can grow up safe." Valeria nestled into his arms, feeling truly safe for the first time in years. Outside the penthouse windows, New York glittered with a million lights, oblivious to the war being waged in the shadows. Somewhere in the city, someone was listening to those planted bugs, hearing about the fake meeting, making their plans. The trap was set. Now they just had to see who walked into it. The next 24 hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Adrian maintained his usual routine, meetings with his legitimate business fronts, calls with his lieutenants, the careful choreography of running an empire from the shadows. But Valeria could see the tension in every movement, the way his eyes constantly tracked to his phone, waiting for confirmation that someone had taken the bait. She spent the day trying to appear normal, though nothing about their situation was normal anymore. Maria moved through the penthouse with her usual efficiency, and Valeria found herself studying the woman who'd been a quiet comfort during the loneliest months of her marriage. Was that kindness genuine, or had it all been an act? Had those sympathetic looks been real, or was Maria reporting every conversation back to whoever was paying her daughter's bills? "Mrs. Vercelli, would you like lunch?" Maria asked, appearing in the doorway of the living room where Valeria sat pretending to read. "Just something light, thank you." Valeria forced a smile, hating the suspicion that colored every interaction now. "Maybe soup?" "Of course. The chicken soup you like?" The one Maria had made specially when Valeria caught a cold last winter, learning the recipe from her own grandmother. The memory felt tainted now, poisoned by doubt. After Maria disappeared into the kitchen, Valeria's clean phone buzzed with a message from Adrian. "Marco confirms movement. Someone made calls within an hour of our argument. Tracing now." Her heart rate kicked up. It was working. Someone had heard the planted information and was already moving pieces into place. A second message followed. "Stay alert, act normal. We'll update soon." Normal. As if anything about this was normal. As if she wasn't sitting in a compromised home, pregnant with the child of a man she'd planned to leave days ago, waiting to see which of their trusted employees had betrayed them. Valeria's hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture that was becoming automatic. 12 weeks. 3 months of life growing inside her, completely dependent on her choices, her safety. The weight of that responsibility was staggering. "Lunch is ready," Maria called from the dining room. Valeria joined her, sitting at the long table that had hosted so many silent meals. The soup was perfect, as always. Rich broth, tender chicken, vegetables cut with precise care. Maria had even included fresh bread, still warm. "This is wonderful, Maria, thank you. You need to keep your strength up." Maria's eyes were kind, concerned. "You've seemed tired lately. Are you feeling all right?" The question could have been innocent, could have been genuine worry. Or it could have been fishing for information about the pregnancy they discovered just days ago. Just stress, Valeria said carefully. Things have been difficult. I've noticed Mr. Vercelli has been different lately. More attentive. Maria refilled her water glass. It's nice to see. You both seem so distant for so long. People change. Valeria kept her voice neutral, wondering if Maria was trying to learn something specific or simply making conversation. Sometimes crisis brings people together, and sometimes it tears them apart. Maria's expression was unreadable. I've worked for Mr. Vercelli for 8 years. I've seen how his world operates. It's not a world that's kind to the people he cares about. Are you warning me about something, Maria? The housekeeper met her eyes directly. I'm saying that in a world like his, trust is dangerous. And sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you most. Before Valeria could respond, before she could figure out if that was a confession or a genuine warning, Adrian's voice cut through the apartment. Valeria, my study. Now! The sharp command in his tone made her abandon lunch immediately. She found him behind his desk, Marco's image on his laptop screen via video call, both men wearing identical expressions of cold fury. What happened? Valeria asked, closing the door behind her. We found our leak. Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. Multiple leaks, actually. Marco spoke from the screen, his weathered face grim. After you planted the false information about the Castellano meeting, I put surveillance on all 3 suspects, Carlos, David Chen, and Maria. Carlos made 4 phone calls within 2 hours. David Chen logged into an encrypted server and uploaded audio files. And Maria... He paused, genuine regret crossing his features. Maria sent a text message to an unknown number with details of the meeting location and time. Valeria's stomach dropped. All 3 of them? All 3, Adrian confirmed, which means this isn't just one person selling information. This is a coordinated operation. Someone recruited multiple people in my household to gather intelligence. But why? Valeria moved closer to the desk. What do they gain from listening to us? Knowledge is power, Marco said. Your marriage troubles, your plans to leave, the pregnancy, all of it paints a picture of Adrian's vulnerabilities. And in our world, vulnerabilities are currency. Adrian pulled up files on his screen showing the phone records and data transfers Marco had traced. The question is who they're reporting to. Marco tracked the communications. They all lead back to different points, but there's a pattern. What kind of pattern? All the money comes from the same source, filtered through different accounts to hide the connection. Marco highlighted sections of financial records. Someone with serious resources set this up months ago. Professional operation, military-grade surveillance equipment, payments structured to avoid detection. This isn't some amateur trying to muscle in on territory. Then who? Valeria asked. Adrian's expression went dark. Marco traced the original funding source. It took some creative accounting and a few calls to people who owe me favors, but we found it. And? It's coming from the Castellano family. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Valeria had heard Adrian mention the Castellanos before, one of the 5 major crime families in New York, rivals who'd maintained an uneasy peace with the Vercellis for years. Why would they go to this much trouble? She asked. Because Victor Castellano is dying, Marco said bluntly. Cancer, maybe 6 months left. And his 3 sons are fighting over who takes control. The youngest, Dante, thinks the best way to prove himself is to eliminate the competition before the old man dies. By going after Adrian's family, Valeria finished, understanding dawning. Make him look weak, distracted by personal problems. Then move in on his territory while he's vulnerable. Exactly. Adrian's hands clenched on the desk. They've been watching us for weeks, gathering information, waiting for the right moment to strike. Your plans to leave would have been perfect. Wife abandoning the great Adrian Vercelli. Would have made me look foolish, damaged my reputation. But then I got pregnant instead, which gave them something even better. His voice was ice. A pregnant wife and an unborn child. The ultimate leverage. They could threaten you both, force me to make concessions, maybe even get me to walk away from my territory entirely to keep you safe. Valeria felt cold despite the warm room. What are we going to do? Adrian looked at Marco. How many people know about the real meeting tomorrow? Just us. I set it up exactly as you specified. Booked the private room at Maria, made it look legitimate. As far as the Castellanos know, you'll be there negotiating with them at 8 p.m. Good. Adrian's smile was predatory. Then that's exactly where I'll be, but not to negotiate. Adrian, Valeria started, but he cut her off. This ends tomorrow night. The Castellanos made a mistake going after my family. Now I'm going to remind them why that was a very bad idea. Marco's expression was approving. You want me to arrange the usual support? No, I want you to make sure Valeria gets back to the mountain compound safely. Take the route through Connecticut, full security detail. Once she's secure, then you bring the team. Absolutely not, Valeria's voice was sharp. You're not sending me away while you walk into a trap. It's not a trap if I'm expecting it. Adrian stood, moved around the desk. I'll have 20 armed men positioned around that restaurant. The Castellanos think they're meeting me for negotiation. Instead, they're going to find out what happens when someone threatens what's mine. And if something goes wrong, if they're more prepared than you think, then Marco gets you somewhere safe and you raise our child far away from this world. He cupped her face in his hands. I need to know you're protected, Valeria. I can't walk into this if I'm worried about you. She wanted to argue, to insist on staying by his side, but the hand she unconsciously placed on her stomach reminded her that she wasn't making decisions for just herself anymore. I hate this, she whispered. I know, but after tomorrow it's over. The Castellanos will understand that coming after my family costs more than they're willing to pay, and we can start building the life we should have had all along. A knock at the study door interrupted them. Maria's voice came through. Mr. Vercelli, there's a delivery for you. The courier insists on handing it to you personally. Adrian and Valeria exchanged glances. I didn't order anything, he said quietly, then raised his voice. Tell them to leave it with security downstairs. He says it's urgent, something about a gift from an old friend. Adrian's hand went to the gun at his waist. Stay here, he told Valeria, then called to Maria. Send him away. I'm not accepting deliveries today. But before Maria could respond, the apartment's power cut out, plunging them into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. That's not a coincidence, Marco said sharply from the laptop screen, now running on battery power. Adrian, you need to get Valeria out of there now. Adrian was already moving, grabbing Valeria's arm, pulling her toward the bedroom. The safe room. Behind the closet. What about you? I'll handle this. Go. But they'd barely made it to the hallway when the apartment door exploded inward with a deafening crash. Armed men in tactical gear poured through the opening, weapons raised, moving with professional precision. Adrian shoved Valeria behind him, his own gun drawn, but they were outnumbered and outpositioned. 5 men, all heavily armed, all trained. This wasn't a random attack. This was a military operation. Put the gun down, Vercelli, one of them said, his voice muffled by a mask. We're not here to kill you, yet. Then what do you want? To deliver a message. The lead man gestured, and 2 others grabbed Valeria before Adrian could react, yanking her away from him. She cried out, fighting against their grip, but they were too strong. Let her go. Adrian's voice was lethal, but the gun now pointed at Valeria's head stopped him from moving. The message is simple, the masked man continued. Dante Castellano sends his regards. Tomorrow night's meeting? Consider it canceled. He's decided to skip negotiations and move straight to the acquisition phase. If you hurt her, we're not going to hurt her. Not today, anyway. The man pulled out a phone, snapped a photo of Valeria being held at gunpoint. This is just a preview, a demonstration that we can get to your wife anytime, anywhere. Your fortress of a penthouse? Not so secure after all. How did you get past my security? Adrian's mind was clearly racing, trying to find an angle, an opportunity. You mean Carlos? He's currently taking a nap. Permanently. The casual mention of murder made Valeria's blood run cold. David Chen helped with the building's security systems. Turns out he's better at disabling them than installing them. And Sweet Maria? She made sure we knew exactly when you'd be in the study, distracted by your little war council. Maria. The betrayal cut deep, even though Valeria had known it was possible. The woman who'd shown her kindness, who'd offered comfort during the loneliest times, all of it had been a lie. What does Dante want? Adrian asked, his voice controlled despite the rage Valeria could see burning in his eyes. Your territory, your operations, your empire. And in exchange, your wife and child live. The masked man moved closer. You have 24 hours to decide. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., you're going to meet Dante at the location we specify. You're going to sign over everything you've built, and then you're going to disappear quietly, leaving New York and never coming back. And if I refuse? The gun pressed harder against Valeria's temple. Then we start sending you pieces of your family until you reconsider. Starting with the baby. Adrian's face went absolutely white, his control slipping for the first time. You're dead. All of you. Dante Castellano, everyone who works for him, everyone who's ever said his name, you're all dead. Big threats from a man with no leverage. The masked man gestured to his team. We're leaving now. Don't try to follow. Don't try anything heroic. We'll be watching. Every move you make, every call you place, we'll know about it. They backed toward the destroyed door, keeping their weapons trained on both Adrian and Valeria. When they reached the hallway, they shoved Valeria forward hard enough to send her stumbling into Adrian's arms, then disappeared into the building's stairwell. The moment they were gone, Adrian pulled out his phone, barking orders. Marco, they just hit the penthouse. 5-man tactical team. Professional operation. I need security sweeps of the entire building. I need to know how they got past our people. And I need to know where Dante Castellano is right now. Marco's voice came through, urgent. On it. Are you and Valeria okay? Physically, yes. But they made their point. Adrian held Valeria tight against him, and she could feel the tremor in his hands. Not fear, but barely contained rage. They can get to her whenever they want. Not if we move now. Get her to the compound, full lockdown protocol. I'll mobilize the team. Adrian pulled back to look at Valeria, checking her for injuries even though she hadn't been harmed. Did they hurt you? No, I'm okay. But she wasn't, not really. The fear still coursed through her veins, making her shake. Adrian, they killed Carlos, just like that. They talked about it like it was nothing. I know. His voice was hollow. This is my world, Valeria. This is what I tried to protect you from. This is why I pushed you away. Don't. She grabbed his face, forced him to look at her. Don't you dare use this to justify shutting me out again. We're in this together, remember? All the way. They threatened our baby. I know. Which means we end this. Not tomorrow night on Dante's terms, but now. On ours. Something shifted in Adrian's expression, the fear and rage crystallizing into cold, calculated determination. You're right. No more defense. No more waiting for them to make the next move. He pulled out his clean phone, made a series of rapid calls. Within minutes, plans were being set in motion. Security teams mobilizing, information networks activating, every resource Adrian had built over years of building his empire now focused on a single objective: destroying the Castellano family. Maria appeared in the doorway, her face pale, eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. Mr. Vercelli, I heard... Save it. Adrian's voice could have cut glass. I know about the texts, the payments to your daughter, everything. You've been feeding information to the Castellanos for 6 weeks. The housekeeper's face crumpled. They said they'd hurt Lucia, that if I didn't help them, they'd... Tears streamed down her face. I didn't want to, Mr. Vercelli. I tried to just give them small things, nothing important. But they kept asking for more, threatening more, and I was so scared. Get out! Adrian's voice was flat. You have 5 minutes to leave this apartment. If you're still here when my security team arrives, you'll be arrested for conspiracy and espionage. Please, I never meant... 4 minutes. Maria fled, her sobs echoing through the apartment. Valeria felt a pang of sympathy despite everything. The woman had been caught between impossible choices, trying to protect her daughter. But that didn't change what she'd done, the betrayal that had put them all at risk. Do you think she was telling the truth? Valeria asked. About being forced? Probably. The Castellanos are good at finding leverage. Adrian moved to the windows, looking out at the city. They found Maria's weak point, her daughter, and exploited it. Same way they tried to exploit my love for you. Tried? I'm not negotiating with terrorists, and I'm sure as hell not signing over everything I've built. His reflection at the glass was hard, ruthless. but I'm going to make sure they never threaten you or our child again." Marco's voice came through the phone, which Adrian had set to speaker. "Boss, I've got locations on 3 of the 5 men who hit your place. Facial recognition from your building's cameras matched them to known Castellano enforcers. They're holed up in a warehouse in Red Hook. Send me the address. And Marco? I want them alive for questioning." "Understood." "What about Dante?" "Let him think he's won. Let him think I'm scared considering his offer. Meanwhile, we're going to quietly dismantle every operation he has, turn his own people against him, and make him understand that coming after my family was the last mistake he'll ever make. That's going to take more than 24 hours. Then he can wait." Adrian's smile was vicious. "Let him sit in his little meeting tomorrow night, waiting for me to show up and surrender. Instead, I'll be systematically destroying everything he's built." Valeria listened to them plan, watched Adrian transform from worried husband back into the ruthless crime boss who'd built an empire. This was the man his enemies feared, the strategist who thought 10 moves ahead, the leader who commanded absolute loyalty. But she also saw the way his hand shook slightly when he looked at her, the fear that flickered in his eyes before the cold mask slipped back into place. He was terrified of losing her, of losing their child, and that fear was going to fuel a war. "What do you need me to do?" she asked when Marco had disconnected to start mobilizing resources. Adrian turned to her. "I need you safe. The compound, full security, no arguments. I can help. You can protect our child." His voice softened. "Valeria, I can't fight this war if I'm worried about you. Please, let me do what I need to do knowing you're somewhere they can't reach you." She wanted to argue, wanted to stand beside him through whatever came next. But the reality was that she'd be a liability in an armed conflict, a distraction Adrian couldn't afford. "Fine," she agreed, "but you check in every 4 hours, and the moment this is over, you come back to me." "Deal." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, a kiss that tasted like promises and desperation. "I love you. I never stopped loving you, and I never will." "Well, then come back to me." She kissed him again. "Come back to us." Within the hour, Marco arrived with a full security detail. The building's compromised security team had been replaced, the dead guard's body removed quietly, the damage to the penthouse door already being repaired. Adrian's world moved with efficient brutality, cleaning up violence like it was just another Tuesday. Valeria packed a bag under Marco's watchful eye, gathering clothes and necessities for what might be an extended stay at the compound. As she moved through the penthouse, she tried not to think about what Adrian was planning, what violence would be necessary to end this threat. But she couldn't stop her mind from going there. Carlos was already dead. How many more would die before this was over? What price would Adrian pay to keep her safe? "Mrs. Vercelli, we need to move," Marco said gently. "Boss wants you on the road before dark." She took one last look at the apartment, the beautiful cage that had felt like a prison for so long. When she came back, everything would be different. Either Adrian would have won and they could start building a real life together, or he'd be dead and she'd be raising their child alone. "I'm ready," she said. Adrian met them at the elevator, his face carefully controlled. He pulled Valeria aside, spoke quietly enough that Marco and the security team couldn't hear. "If something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. If it does," he continued firmly, "Marco has instructions. Bank accounts in your name, properties around the world, everything you and the baby would need. Documents for new identities, contacts who can help you disappear, you'll be taken care of." "Adrian, stop. I need to say this." His hands cupped her face. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. These past 2 years, pushing you away, they were the biggest mistake of my life. If I could go back, if I could do it differently, we can't go back. But we can go forward." She covered his hands with hers. "So you need to win this fight, Adrian. You need to come back to me so we can have that forward together." "I will." He kissed her one more time, deep and claiming. "I swear to you, I will." Then Marco was ushering her into the elevator, and the doors were closing, and Adrian was standing alone in the penthouse, looking like a man preparing for war. The drive to the compound felt endless. Marco had brought 3 other vehicles, each with armed guards, creating a convoy designed to repel any attack. They took a circuitous route through Connecticut, changing highways multiple times to ensure they weren't followed. Valeria sat in the back of the armored SUV, one hand on her stomach, trying not to think about Adrian facing down the Castellano family alone, trying not to imagine all the ways this could go wrong. "He'll be okay," Marco said, as if reading her thoughts. "I've known Adrian for 15 years. I've seen him handle situations that should have killed him 10 times over. He's smart, he's ruthless, and he's fighting for you. That makes him more dangerous than Dante Castellano could possibly understand. He's one man against an entire family. He's one man with an empire behind him. And more importantly, he's got something worth fighting for now. That changes everything." They arrived at the compound as night fell, the mountain fortress lit up like a beacon in the darkness. The security team had been reinforced. She counted at least 20 guards, all heavily armed, all positioned strategically around the property. Inside, the warm great room felt less comforting than it had before. Now it just felt like a very nice prison, gilded bars designed to keep her safe while Adrian fought battles she couldn't see. Her clean phone buzzed with a message. "Arrived safely at command center. Operations beginning now. I love you." She typed back, "Stay safe, come home to us." The response was immediate, always. Valeria settled into the master suite, trying to find ways to pass the time. She tried reading, watching television, anything to distract her mind from imagining what Adrian was doing. But every hour that passed felt like an eternity. At midnight, her phone buzzed again. First operation successful. Castellano warehouse in Red Hook secured. 2 enforcers in custody being questioned. Relief flooded through her. He was okay. He was winning. At 4 a.m. Second target acquired. Dante's drug operation in Queens shut down. Assets seized. At 8 a.m. Financial accounts frozen. 3 more Castellano properties under our control. Dante's starting to realize he made a mistake. The messages continued throughout the day, each one marking another victory in Adrian's systematic destruction of the Castellano operations. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly ruthless, exactly what she'd expect from the man who'd built an empire from nothing. But there was still no word about Dante himself. The architect of this entire nightmare remained free, somewhere in the city, watching his power crumble. At 6 p.m., 36 hours after the attack on their penthouse, Valeria's phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. She answered immediately. "Adrian? It's over." His voice sounded exhausted but triumphant. "Dante Castellano just surrendered himself to me. He's agreed to leave New York permanently, dissolve his operations, and transfer everything to neutral parties. In exchange, I'm letting him and his brothers live." "You're letting them live?" She was surprised. She'd expected Adrian to demand blood for blood. "Killing them would start a war with Victor Castellano, and I don't need that. Not now, not with a family to protect." He paused. "Dante learned his lesson. He understands what happens when you threaten what's mine. That's enough. When are you coming back?" "Tomorrow. I need to finalize some things, make sure the surrender terms are ironclad. But then I'm coming home to you." Home. The word carried weight it never had before. "I'll be waiting," Valeria said. "Valeria, there's something else." Adrian's voice shifted, became uncertain in a way she'd never heard. "When this is all over, when things are safe, I want to do this right. The marriage, the family, all of it. I want us to start over, build something real." "We already are," she said softly. "Every day we choose each other, we're building something real. I love you. I love you too. Now finish what you started and come home." She hung up, pressed the phone to her chest, and finally let herself cry. Tears of relief, of fear released, of hope for the future they might actually get to have. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day. A new beginning. And somewhere in New York City, Adrian Vercelli was finishing a war so that their family could finally have peace. Adrian arrived at the compound just before sunset the following day, and Valeria knew the moment his car pulled through the gates. She'd been watching from the window for hours, unable to focus on anything else, her entire body tense with anticipation and residual fear. When he walked through the door, she saw immediately that the war had taken its toll. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His jaw was covered in 2 days of stubble, and there was a cut above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. But he was alive, whole, and when his eyes found hers across the room, the relief in them mirrored her own. "Hi," he said, the simple word carrying the weight of everything they'd been through. Valeria closed the distance between them, launching herself into his arms with enough force to make him stagger back. He caught her easily, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "You came back," she whispered against his chest. "I promised you I would." His voice was rough, exhausted. "It's over, Valeria. Really over. Dante signed everything this morning. He and his brothers are leaving New York tonight, permanently. Their operations have been dissolved. Their people absorbed into neutral territories. They'll never threaten us again." She pulled back enough to see his face, her fingers gentle as they traced the cut above his eyebrow. "What happened here?" "One of Dante's enforcers got lucky with a bottle before I got unlucky with my fist." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "You should see the other guy." "Adrian? I'm fine. Tired, but fine." He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then finally her lips. A kiss that started gentle, but deepened into something desperate. Two people who'd come too close to losing everything, finding reassurance in each other's touch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. "I need to shower, sleep for about 12 hours, and then we need to talk, really talk, about everything." "I'll be here," Valeria promised. She waited downstairs while he showered, making tea she didn't drink, trying to process the fact that the immediate danger had passed. Dante Castellano was gone. The surveillance equipment had been removed from their penthouse. The people who'd betrayed them were either dead or fled. They were safe. So why did she still feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop? Adrian reappeared an hour later, clean and wearing comfortable clothes, looking more human but still exhausted. He'd shaved, tended to the cut on his face, but the weariness went deeper than physical fatigue. "You should sleep," Valeria said when he joined her on the sofa. "I will, but first we talk." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "These past few days, fighting to protect you and our baby, it made me realize something." "What?" "I've spent 2 years trying to keep you safe by pushing you away. And in those 2 years, I made you miserable, made myself miserable, and didn't actually protect you from anything. The moment real danger came, all my careful distance meant nothing. The Castellanos still found a way to threaten you." Valeria listened, seeing the self-recrimination in his eyes. "But when we worked together," Adrian continued, "when we trusted each other and fought as partners, that's when we actually won. You were right that first night when you said we needed to be honest with each other, even when honesty is dangerous. I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to control a situation that couldn't be controlled." His grip on her hand tightened. "I can't promise you that there won't be more threats. My world doesn't work that way. There will always be someone looking for an advantage, someone willing to target the people I love to get to me. But I can promise you that I'll never lie to you about it again. No more distance, no more protection through coldness. We face everything together." "Together," Valeria agreed. "But Adrian, that has to go both ways. You can't make unilateral decisions about what's best for me, for us. If we're partners, then we make choices as partners." "Even when those choices put you in danger?" "Especially then." She placed his hand on her stomach, over the small life growing there. "Our child is going to grow up in your world whether we like it or not. They'll inherit your enemies along with your empire. We can't protect them from that reality by pretending it doesn't exist. But we can teach them to be strong, to be smart, to face danger with their eyes open." Adrian's eyes went soft as his palm spread across her belly. "You're going to be an amazing mother. And you're going to be an amazing father. If you stop trying to save everyone by sacrificing yourself." He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. "When did you get so wise?" "When I spent 2 years married to someone who wouldn't talk to me. Gave me a lot of time to think." She shifted closer, tucking herself against his side. "So what happens now? Do we go back to the penthouse? Back to normal life?" "Eventually. But first I want to take some time. Just us. Away from the city. Away from the business. Let you recover from the stress. Let us figure out how to actually be married to each other." His hand continued its gentle exploration of her stomach. "And I want to completely restructure my security. What happened with the Castellanos showed me I've gotten sloppy, trusted the wrong people, relied on systems that could be compromised. What about your business, your operations? Marco can handle things for a few weeks. He's been my second for 10 years. He knows how everything works. And honestly, the Castellano situation actually strengthened my position. Their territory, their operations, it all got redistributed. And I made sure the right people understood that I was the one who orchestrated it. He paused. I also made some calls while I was in the city, started the process of legitimizing some of our operations. Valeria sat up, surprised. Legitimizing? I can't keep running the same operations when I have a child to think about. Too risky, too many variables I can't control. His expression was thoughtful. I'm not going to become a saint overnight. I am who I am. But there are ways to maintain power and influence without the constant violence. Real estate, investment firms, security consulting. Wealthy people love hiring someone with my particular skill set to protect their interests. What, you're going to go legitimate? Partially. Transition some things, maintain others more quietly. It'll take years, but by the time our child is old enough to understand what I do, I want them to see a father who builds things instead of just destroying them. The thought of Adrian as anything other than a crime boss was strange, but Valeria could see the determination in his face. He meant it. He was actually willing to change his entire life for their family. That's going to make you a lot of enemies, she said quietly. The families who benefit from the current system won't like you disrupting it. Let them try to stop me. The steel in his voice reminded her exactly who she was talking to. I just took down the Castellano family in 48 hours. Anyone else who wants to test me is welcome to try. They sat together as the sun fully set, the room darkening around them until the only light came from the fireplace. Marco appeared briefly to update Adrian on security arrangements and confirmed that all systems were nominal, then disappeared again with the discretion of someone who understood when to leave his boss alone. Are you hungry? Adrian asked eventually. I can't remember the last time either of us ate a real meal. Starving, actually. Now that the immediate crisis had passed, Valeria's body was reminding her of all the normal human needs she'd been ignoring. Though I should warn you, pregnancy cravings are starting to kick in. I've been dreaming about pickles and ice cream. That's a real thing? Adrian stood, pulling her up with him. I thought that was just in movies. Very real. Also, apparently I can't stand the smell of coffee anymore, which is tragic. They moved to the kitchen, and Adrian proved surprisingly competent at assembling a meal from the well-stocked refrigerator. Nothing fancy, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, but it was warm and comforting, and they ate together at the kitchen island like a normal couple might. Tell me about the doctor's appointment, Adrian said as they ate. I know Dr. Chen confirmed the pregnancy, but what else did she say? Valeria filled him in on the details. The 12-week timeline, the blood tests, the warning about stress. She wants to see me again in 2 weeks for a more thorough ultrasound. We might be able to hear the heartbeat then. I want to be there for that. The intensity in his voice made it clear this wasn't a request. For all of it. Every appointment, every milestone. I missed the first 3 months not even knowing you were pregnant. I don't want to miss anything else. You won't. She reached across to take his hand. We're doing this together, remember? They finished eating and cleaned up side by side, falling into an easy rhythm that felt both foreign and natural. 2 years of living as strangers had created awkwardness, but beneath it was the foundation of what had drawn them together in the first place, the easy compatibility, the way they fit together. I should sleep, Adrian said eventually, exhaustion clearly catching up to him. I'm dead on my feet. Come on. Valeria led him upstairs to the master suite, the same room she'd been staying in since arriving at the compound. When he hesitated at the doorway, she gave him a look. You're not sleeping somewhere else. We've spent enough nights apart. I just don't want to assume. Adrian, get in the bed. He did, and Valeria climbed in beside him, fitting herself against his side the way she used to in those first perfect months of their marriage. His arm came around her automatically, holding her close, and within minutes his breathing had evened out into sleep. Valeria stayed awake longer, her hand on her stomach, thinking about the future. They had so much to figure out still, where they'd live, how they'd navigate parenthood, what Adrian's transition to legitimate business would actually look like. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt genuine hope that they could figure it out together. She woke the next morning to find Adrian already awake, propped up on one elbow, watching her with an expression of such tenderness it made her chest ache. "How long have you been awake?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. "A while. I was watching you sleep." He brushed hair back from her face. "I forgot how beautiful you are first thing in the morning, how the sunlight catches in your hair, how peaceful you look when you're not worrying about everything." Well, that's borderline creepy, watching someone sleep. Probably, but I've missed 2 years of mornings with you. I'm making up for lost time. Valeria stretched, felt the familiar wave of nausea that came with early pregnancy. "I need crackers, and maybe some ginger ale." "I'll get it." Adrian was up immediately, heading downstairs and returning minutes later with both items plus some fruit. Dr. Chen said small, frequent meals help with morning sickness. "You actually listened to her instructions?" "I listened to everything, took notes." He settled back into bed beside her, watching as she nibbled crackers until the nausea subsided. "I've also been reading about pregnancy. Did you know the baby's heart started beating at 6 weeks? And right now, at 12 weeks, they're about the size of a plum?" The image of Adrian Vercelli, ruthless crime boss, reading pregnancy books was both adorable and surreal. "You've been researching." "Of course I have. I need to know what's happening, what to expect, how to help you." He placed his hand on her stomach again, that gesture already becoming familiar. "This is the most important thing I've ever done. I'm not going to mess it up by being unprepared." "Adrian, there's no way to prepare for parenthood. Everyone just figures it out as they go." "Then I'll figure it out better than everyone else." The determination in his voice made her smile. This was the same intensity he brought to everything. If Adrian Vercelli was going to be a father, he was going to be the best father possible, even if he had to read every parenting book ever written to do it. They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, eating breakfast, taking a walk around the compound's grounds, talking about everything and nothing. Adrian showed her the security improvements he'd already ordered, the additional safeguards being installed. Valeria told him about Sophie's reaction when she'd finally been able to call her best friend and explain everything. "She wants to visit," Valeria said as they walked through the forest surrounding the property. "Once we're back in the city, she says she needs to see for herself that you're actually acting like a decent husband now. She never liked me much, did she? She watched me cry over you for 2 years. Of course she didn't like you." Valeria squeezed his hand. "But she'll come around, especially once she sees that you're serious about making this work." "I am serious." Adrian stopped walking, turned to face her fully. "Valeria, I know I have a lot to prove. 2 years of hurt doesn't disappear overnight, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that you're loved, that you're cherished, that you're the most important thing in my world." "You and our baby," she corrected gently. "You and our baby," he agreed. "My family. Everything else, the business, the power, the money, it's all meaningless if I don't have you." They returned to the house for lunch, and Valeria noticed Adrian fielding calls from Marco throughout the day. Business continuing, the empire running smoothly, even without his constant oversight. It was proof that he could step back, could delegate, could create space for a life beyond the organization. That evening, as they sat by the fireplace after dinner, Adrian brought up something Valeria had been wondering about. "I've been thinking about the penthouse," he said, "whether we should go back there at all." "What do you mean?" "That place has bad memories now. The surveillance, the attack, 2 years of us barely speaking to each other. Maybe we should start fresh somewhere new. A real home, not just an expensive showpiece." Valeria considered this. The penthouse was beautiful, but he was right. It represented everything that had been broken between them. "What did you have in mind?" "There's a townhouse in the West Village I've had my eye on for a while. 5 stories, private garden, enough space for a family, quiet street, good security options, near parks and schools." He glanced at her. "I bought it last year, actually. Kept telling myself it was an investment, but I think part of me was always hoping we'd need it someday. For when we had children." "You bought a family home while actively pushing me away?" "I never stopped hoping you'd forgive me eventually, even when I thought it was impossible." His voice was quiet. "The house has been sitting empty. I'd like to show it to you, see if you can imagine us living there." "I'd like that." The idea of a fresh start, A home they chose together specifically for raising their child appealed to her. When can we see it? Whenever you're ready to go back to the city. Marco says the penthouse has been swept clean. No more bugs, upgraded security, safe to return to. But there's no rush. We can stay here as long as you want. Valeria thought about it. The compound was safe, peaceful, isolated, but it was also Adrian's fortress, built for crisis situations, not everyday living. And she couldn't hide here forever. Let's go back this weekend, she decided. See the townhouse, start making plans. I want to begin building our real life together, not just hiding from danger. This weekend it is. They spent the next few days in the cocoon of the compound, slowly rebuilding the intimacy they'd lost. They talked for hours about everything. Adrian's childhood, Valeria's dreams before they met, what kind of parents they wanted to be. They cooked meals together, took long walks, sat by the fire in comfortable silence. They learned each other again, discovering who they'd become during the 2 years of distance. And slowly, carefully, they began rebuilding the physical connection too. Tentative touches that grew bolder, kisses that deepened. The night before they were set to return to the city, they made love for the first time since that desperate encounter 3 months ago, and it was different than it had ever been before. More honest, more vulnerable, more real. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Adrian's hand splayed protectively over her stomach. Valeria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete. They returned to Manhattan on Saturday morning, Marco driving them in an armored SUV with 2 security vehicles flanking them. The city felt different now, still vibrant and alive, but somehow less threatening. Or maybe she was just different, stronger, no longer the woman who'd felt invisible in her own marriage. Adrian took her straight to the West Village, pulling up in front of a beautiful brownstone on a tree-lined street. It was stunning, classic New York architecture with modern updates, the kind of place that felt like a home instead of a showpiece. "Ready?" Adrian asked, something nervous in his voice. They walked through together, and Valeria fell in love with every room. The main floor had an open kitchen and living area that flowed into the private garden. The second floor held a formal dining room and Adrian's study. The third floor had a master suite with a bathroom larger than some New York apartments. And the fourth floor. "This could be the nursery," Adrian said, showing her a sun-filled room with windows overlooking the garden. "And this one next to it could be a playroom or a room for when they're older. The 5th floor has 2 more bedrooms for guests, or if we have more children." More children. The casual way he said it, like he was already planning their entire future, made Valeria's heart skip. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "Adrian, this place is perfect." The relief on his face was palpable. "You really think so? Because if you don't like it, we can keep looking. I want you to love wherever we live. I want it to feel like home." "I do love it, but more importantly, I can see us here. I can see raising our baby in this house, having family dinners in that dining room, watching them play in the garden." She turned to him. "When can we move in?" "Whenever you want. The place is fully furnished already. I may have gotten a little ahead of myself last year. We just need to add personal touches, set up the nursery, make it ours." They spent the afternoon walking through the townhouse again, making plans. Adrian called contractors about converting the 4th floor room into a nursery. Valeria researched furniture and color schemes. They stood in the empty room that would someday hold their child and talked about the kind of life they wanted to create. "I want them to feel safe," Valeria said, her hand on her stomach. "Not sheltered from reality, but genuinely safe. Like they have parents who will protect them but also let them be their own person. I want them to be strong," Adrian added, "but kind. Powerful, but with a moral compass. Everything I learned too late, I want them to know from the beginning. They'll be amazing, because they'll have both of us." That evening, they returned to the penthouse to pack up the things they wanted to bring to their new home. Walking into the apartment felt strange. It looked the same, but everything had changed. This wasn't their home anymore. It was just a place they used to live. "I'm putting this on the market," Adrian said, looking around with an expression of distaste. "Let someone else live here. We're done with this place and everything it represents." Valeria agreed. They spent the night boxing up clothes and personal items, laughing when they found things from their early marriage, photos from their wedding, silly gifts they'd given each other, reminders of when they'd been happy. "We were so young," Valeria said, holding their wedding photo. "I thought I knew everything about love. Turns out I didn't know anything." Neither did I. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind, looking at the photo over her shoulder. But we're learning, and we're going to keep learning together. The next week was a blur of activity. They moved into the townhouse, transforming it from a beautiful empty house into a home. Valeria's friend Sophie visited and grudgingly admitted that Adrian seemed genuinely changed, though she warned that if he ever hurt Valeria again, there would be consequences. Dr. Chen came for a house call, performing the ultrasound in the comfort of their new home. And there, on the small screen, they saw their baby for the first time. A tiny form with a rapidly beating heart, incredibly real and impossibly precious. "That's our baby," Valeria whispered, tears streaming down her face. Adrian couldn't speak, his hand gripping hers so tight it almost hurt, his eyes fixed on the screen with an expression of pure wonder. When Dr. Chen printed out images for them, he held the grainy photos like they were made of gold. "We're really doing this," he said later that night, the ultrasound images carefully placed on the mantel in their bedroom. "We're going to be parents." Terrifying, isn't it? Absolutely. He pulled her close. "But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you." Business continued, but Adrian had clearly meant what he said about restructuring. He spent more time in meetings with lawyers and financial advisors than with his traditional lieutenants. Shell companies were being established, legitimate businesses created or acquired, the slow process of transitioning from purely criminal enterprises to something more sustainable. It wouldn't happen overnight. Adrian's empire was too vast, too complex to simply walk away from. But he was building something different, creating a legacy their child could inherit without shame. Marco visited regularly, updating Adrian on operations but also becoming something of a friend to both of them. He'd been horrified by the Castellano situation, had personally hunted down David Chen, and ensured the false identity tech consultant would never work again. The loyalty he showed to Adrian extended to Valeria and their unborn child, and she found herself trusting the gruff lieutenant. One evening, about 3 weeks after they'd moved into the townhouse, Valeria was in the nursery room they'd begun decorating. She'd picked a soft sage green for the walls, with white furniture and accents of natural wood. It was coming together beautifully, transforming from empty space into a place ready to welcome new life. Adrian found her there, standing in the middle of the room with her hand on her stomach, which was just beginning to show a small bump. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. How much has changed in just a few weeks? How I went from planning to leave you to planning a nursery with you." She turned to face him. "I'm happy, Adrian. For the first time in years, I'm genuinely happy." "So am I." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "I was thinking we should take a trip before the baby comes. Somewhere warm, somewhere we can just be together without any pressure or stress." "Where did you have in mind?" "I have a house in the Caribbean, private island, completely secure, just us and a small staff. We could spend a couple weeks there, really relax before everything changes when the baby arrives." The idea was tempting. "When?" "Whenever you want. Your next ultrasound is in 2 weeks, right? We could go after that, once Dr. Chen confirms everything's progressing well." "Let's do it." Valeria kissed him. "A baby moon before we become actual parents." They planned the trip over the following days, Adrian arranging every detail with his usual precision. The island home had apparently been in his family for years, a place his father had used for truly private meetings. Now it would be where Adrian and Valeria spent their last weeks as just the two of them. The second ultrasound confirmed that everything was progressing perfectly. Their baby was growing on schedule, healthy and active. And this time, the ultrasound tech was able to give them information they'd been waiting for. "Do you want to know the sex?" she asked. Valeria looked at Adrian, saw the same anticipation she felt mirrored in his eyes. "Yes," they said simultaneously. The tech smiled. "Congratulations, you're having a daughter." A daughter. Valeria's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. Adrian's expression went soft in a way she'd never seen before. Wonder and fear and love all mixed together. "A girl," he whispered. "We're having a girl." In the car ride home, Adrian was quieter than usual, his hand resting on Valeria's small bump. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm going to have a daughter who'll inherit my eyes and your stubbornness and probably wrap me around her little finger from day one." He smiled, but there was concern there too. And that I need to make absolutely sure the world I'm leaving for her is better than the one I inherited. You're already doing that. I need to do more. His jaw set with determination. I want her to be proud of her father, not ashamed. I want her to grow up strong and safe, and knowing she's loved unconditionally. She will, because she'll have both of us showing her that every single day. They flew to the Caribbean the following week, just the two of them, and a pilot Adrian trusted. The island was everything he'd promised. Pristine beaches, crystal clear water, a beautiful house designed for privacy and comfort. A small staff maintained the property, but gave them space, appearing only when needed. For 2 weeks, Adrian and Valeria existed in a bubble outside the real world. They spent mornings on the beach, afternoons exploring the island, evenings watching the sunset from their private deck. They talked about names for their daughter, about parenting philosophies, about their hopes and fears for the future. I want to name her after someone strong, Valeria said one evening as they watched stars emerge in the darkening sky. Someone who overcame obstacles and didn't let the world define her. What about Isabella? Adrian suggested. It means devoted to the divine. And Isabella of Castile was one of the most powerful rulers in history. Isabella Vercelli. Valeria tested it, liked the way it sounded. It's beautiful, strong but elegant. Like her mother. They made love often during those 2 weeks, reconnecting physically in ways they'd lost during their separation. Adrian was endlessly fascinated by the changes in Valeria's body, the way her breasts had grown fuller, the small bump of her belly, the way she seemed to glow with an inner radiance. "You're so beautiful like this," he murmured one night, his hands exploring her curves, carrying our daughter, building our family. "Even with stretch marks starting?" Valeria asked, self-conscious about the faint lines appearing on her stomach. "Especially with them. They're proof that you're creating life. They're perfect." On their last night on the island, they had dinner on the beach, a table set up in the sand, candles flickering in the warm breeze, the ocean providing a gentle soundtrack. As they finished eating, Adrian pulled out a small box. "I know we're already married," he said, opening it to reveal a stunning ring. Not the simple band he'd given her at their wedding, but something more elaborate, a diamond surrounded by smaller stones in a vintage setting. "But I want to do this right this time. No secrets, no distance, no protection through coldness. Just two people choosing each other, honestly and completely." He knelt in the sand, taking her hand. "Valeria Romano Vercelli, will you marry me again? Will you build a life with me, raise our daughter together, and let me spend every day proving that you're the best thing that ever happened to me?" Valeria was crying, laughing, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger beside the original band, then stood to kiss her as waves lapped at the shore and stars wheeled overhead. They flew back to New York the next day, tanned and relaxed and more united than they'd ever been. The townhouse welcomed them home, and Valeria realized with surprise that it truly felt like home now. Not just a beautiful house, but the place where they were building their life together. Over the following weeks, they settled into a rhythm. Adrian continued transitioning his business operations, spending less time on criminal enterprises and more on legitimate ventures. Marco reported that the restructuring was going smoothly, that the other families were watching carefully but not interfering. Adrian's handling of the Castellano situation had sent a clear message. He was still dangerous, still someone to be respected and feared. Valeria's pregnancy progressed beautifully. The morning sickness faded, replaced by the second trimester energy everyone had promised. She started preparing the nursery in earnest, picking out furniture and decorating with an excitement she'd never expected to feel. Sophie became a regular visitor, bringing baby clothes and advice, and gradually warming to Adrian as she saw how devoted he was to Valeria. Other friends followed, people Valeria had drifted away from during the lonely years of her marriage, and the townhouse filled with life and laughter. One evening in late autumn, when Valeria was almost 6 months pregnant and showing noticeably, she found Adrian in his study looking at financial reports. "What are you working on?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. "Finalizing the transfer of our offshore accounts into legitimate trusts. Making sure everything is properly documented so that when Isabella inherits, it's all clean." He looked up. "I'm also establishing a foundation. using some of the wealth I've accumulated over the years to actually do good. Education programs, support for families affected by violence, that kind of thing. Valeria was touched. That's beautiful, Adrian. It's practical. I can't undo all the harm I've caused over the years, but I can try to balance the scales a little. He came around the desk to kneel in front of her chair, his hands on her swollen belly. I want Isabella to inherit more than just money and property. I want her to inherit a legacy of someone who changed, who tried to be better. Their daughter kicked against his palm as if in agreement, and Adrian's face lit up with that expression of wonder that appeared whenever he felt their baby move. She's strong, he said, already making her presence known. Takes after both of us. As the months progressed toward Valeria's due date, they finalized preparations. The nursery was complete, a beautiful sage green room with a white crib, a comfortable rocking chair, shelves already filling with books Adrian had been buying. Dr. Chen had them on speed dial, ready to attend the birth whenever Isabella decided to make her appearance. Adrian had become almost comically protective as Valeria's stomach grew larger. He insisted on helping her with everything, hovering whenever she walked downstairs, monitoring what she ate to make sure she was getting proper nutrition. It was endearing and occasionally annoying, but Valeria understood the fear beneath it. He'd almost lost them both to the Castellanos. Now that they were safe, he was determined not to lose them to anything else. One night in early spring, when Valeria was 8.5 months pregnant and feeling like she might pop at any moment, she woke to find Adrian not beside her. She found him in the nursery, sitting in the rocking chair, staring at the empty crib with an expression of such tenderness it made her heart ache. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, not startled by her presence, just thinking about how much is about to change. In a couple weeks, there will be a baby in that crib. Our daughter, a whole person we're responsible for creating and shaping and protecting. Scary, isn't it? Terrifying. He smiled, but also amazing. I spent so many years convinced I'd never have this. A real family, a home, someone to love who loved me back. I thought my father was right, that love was weakness and attachment was liability. And then you proved me wrong about everything. Valeria crossed to him, let him pull her onto his lap despite her ungainly size. We proved each other wrong. I thought I wanted safety and predictability. Turns out I wanted partnership and truth instead. They sat together in the quiet nursery, imagining the life that would soon fill this room with noise and chaos and joy. Outside the windows, New York continued its endless rhythm, the city that had witnessed their broken marriage and their difficult reconciliation, now waiting to meet the newest member of the Vercelli family. "Whatever comes next," Adrian said quietly, "we face it together." "Always together," Valeria agreed. And in that moment, sitting in the peaceful nursery of the home they'd built together, preparing to welcome the daughter they'd created from love and second chances, both of them finally understood what they'd been searching for all along. Not perfection, not safety, not even happiness exactly, but something better, something real. A family built on honesty and trust and the determination to keep choosing each other, no matter how hard things got. The life they'd almost lost by trying too hard to protect it. The life they'd saved by finally learning to fight for it together. Isabella Rose Vercelli arrived 3 days before her due date, at 2 a.m. on a rainy April night that turned the streets of New York into rivers of light and shadow. Valeria's water broke while she was reaching for a glass of water in the kitchen, and the sudden rush of fluid was followed immediately by a contraction strong enough to make her gasp. Adrian, who'd been sleeping lightly for weeks in anticipation of this moment, appeared at her side before she could even call his name. "It's time?" he asked, already moving into action mode, his hand steady on her back even though she could see the fear flickering in his eyes. "It's time," Valeria confirmed, breathing through another contraction. "But don't panic. First babies take a while. We have time to—" Another contraction cut her off, stronger than the first, and Adrian's eyes went wide. That was less than 2 minutes between contractions. That's not normal for early labor. "Since when are you an expert?" "Since I read 12 books on childbirth and memorized every possible complication." He was already calling Dr. Chen, giving her rapid updates while simultaneously helping Valeria toward the door. "She says we need to get to the hospital now. Some babies come fast." The drive to the private hospital where Dr. Chen had privileges was tense and surreal. Rain hammered against the windshield while Adrian navigated through empty streets with one hand on the wheel and one hand gripping Valeria's. Marco had materialized from somewhere. Apparently he'd been stationed nearby for exactly this scenario, and drove while Adrian sat in the back with Valeria, timing contractions that were now coming every 90 seconds. "This is happening too fast," Valeria panted, fear creeping into the excitement. "Something's wrong." "Nothing's wrong," Adrian said firmly, though his voice was tight with worry. "Some labors just progress quickly. Dr. Chen will be there. Everything's going to be fine." But when they reached the hospital and Dr. Chen examined Valeria, her expression became serious. "You're already 8 centimeters dilated. This baby is coming very soon, and she's in a hurry." The next hour was a blur of pain and pressure, and Adrian's voice in her ear, steady and calm, even when Valeria was certain she was going to break in half. Dr. Chen moved with efficient precision. Nurses appeared and disappeared, and through it all Adrian never left her side, letting her crush his hand during contractions, wiping sweat from her forehead, murmuring encouragement. "I can't do this," Valeria gasped during a particularly brutal contraction. "It's too much. I can't." "Yes, you can." Adrian's face filled her vision, his dark eyes fierce and certain. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived 2 years married to an idiot who didn't know what he had. You faced down crime bosses and death threats. You can do this." "That's different. This is just another battle, and you've never lost a battle in your life." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Our daughter is almost here, Valeria. Just a little longer." "Doctor." Chen's voice cut through the haze. "Valeria, on the next contraction I need you to push." What followed was the hardest physical work of Valeria's life, pushing through pain that seemed impossible to endure, drawing on reserves of strength she didn't know she had. Adrian counted through each push, his voice the anchor that kept her grounded when the pain threatened to sweep her away completely. And then, after what felt like both hours and seconds, a different sound filled the room, the sharp, indignant cry of a newborn baby. "She's here," Dr. Chen said, and suddenly there was a tiny, perfect human being on Valeria's chest, red-faced and screaming and absolutely beautiful. "Your daughter." Valeria looked down at Isabella Rose Vercelli and felt her entire world reorganize around this 7-pound miracle. Dark hair plastered to a perfectly round head, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness of the world, tiny fists waving in outrage at being ejected from her warm cocoon. "Hi, baby girl," Valeria whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Hi, Isabella. We've been waiting for you." She looked up to share the moment with Adrian and found him frozen, staring at their daughter with an expression of such overwhelming emotion that it transformed his entire face. The ruthless crime boss had vanished completely, replaced by a man utterly undone by love. "Adrian?" Valeria said softly. He reached out with shaking hands, touching Isabella's tiny fingers with a reverence usually reserved for sacred things. When their daughter's hand closed reflexively around his finger, Adrian made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "She's perfect," he whispered. "Valeria, she's absolutely perfect." "Do you want to hold her?" Dr. Chen asked after the nurses had cleaned Isabella up and wrapped her in a soft blanket. Adrian looked terrified. "What if I drop her?" "You won't drop her." Valeria smiled through her exhaustion. "Come here." Dr. Chen showed him how to support Isabella's head, how to cradle her securely in his arms. Adrian took his daughter with the same intense focus he brought to everything, his large hands gentle as they cradled her small body. Isabella had stopped crying, her eyes opening to stare up at her father with that unfocused newborn gaze. "Hello, Isabella," Adrian said quietly. "I'm your father. And I promise you, I promise, that I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you're loved, that you're safe, that you can be whoever you want to be without fear." Watching them together, Valeria felt something settle into place inside her. This was what everything had been leading to, not just the pregnancy and labor, but the entire journey of their marriage. The pain and separation and hard-won reconciliation had all been necessary to bring them to this moment, ready to be the parents Isabella deserved. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days while Valeria recovered and they learned the basics of caring for their daughter. Isabella was a good baby, aside from her tendency to scream bloody murder when her diaper was wet. Adrian took to fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything else. carefully studying the nurse's demonstrations and practicing diaper changes until he could do them perfectly. Marco visited, bringing flowers and a stuffed bear larger than the baby herself, his weathered face softening when he held Isabella for the first time. "She's got your eyes, boss," he said, "and probably your stubbornness." "She's going to rule the world someday," Adrian said with complete certainty. "Look at that grip. She knows what she wants." Sophie came by with an armload of baby clothes and barely concealed tears, holding Isabella and whispering fierce promises about being the best auntie ever. Other friends followed, filling the hospital room with flowers and laughter and congratulations. But when visiting hours ended and they were finally alone, just Adrian, Valeria, and Isabella in the quiet room, the reality of their new life finally sank in. "We're parents," Valeria said, watching Isabella sleep in the clear bassinet beside her bed. "We're parents," Adrian echoed, sounding both awed and terrified. "What if we mess it up?" "We probably will, sometimes." He reached over to take her hand. "But we'll mess it up together, and we'll figure it out together. And Isabella will grow up knowing she's loved even when we make mistakes." Taking Isabella home was both exciting and nerve-wracking. The townhouse had been prepared for weeks, but somehow the presence of an actual baby made everything feel different. The nursery they'd so carefully decorated now held a real child. The quiet home they'd built together was about to become much noisier. Adrian drove home at approximately 15 miles per hour, treating every bump in the road like a catastrophe. Marco followed in a second car. Security tightened despite the fact that the Castellano threat had been permanently neutralized. Some protective instincts ran too deep to ever fully relax. That first night at home tested everything they thought they knew. Isabella cried every 2 hours, wanting to be fed, changed, held, comforted. Valeria was exhausted from labor and recovery, her body aching and foreign. Adrian stumbled through diaper changes and bottle preparations with the determination of someone learning a new language. At 4 in the morning, Valeria found him in the nursery, walking Isabella in slow circles while singing something that might have been a lullaby but sounded more like an Italian folk song. "I didn't know you could sing," she said from the doorway. Adrian looked up, bleary-eyed but smiling. "I can't, but she doesn't seem to care." He swayed gently, Isabella finally sleeping against his chest. "I was just thinking about my father, how he used to say that having a family made you weak, that love was the greatest vulnerability. And what do you think now?" "I think he was wrong about everything." Adrian looked down at Isabella's sleeping face. "This, holding our daughter, knowing you're both safe and healthy. This is the strongest I've ever felt. Like I could take on the entire world if it meant protecting you two." Valeria crossed to them, wrapped her arms around both Adrian and Isabella, creating a small family circle in the soft glow of the nightlight. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? All 3 of us." "Better than okay?" Adrian kissed the top of her head. "We're going to be extraordinary." The first weeks of parenthood were a chaotic blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the steep learning curve of understanding what different cries meant. Valeria's body slowly healed from labor while her heart expanded in ways she hadn't known were possible. Adrian threw himself into fatherhood with characteristic intensity, reading every baby development book he could find and treating Isabella's care like a mission to be mastered. They had help, of course. A nanny came during the day to give them breaks, and Dr. Chen visited regularly to check on both Valeria and Isabella's progress. But the nights were just the 3 of them, learning to be a family in the quiet hours when the rest of the world slept. One particularly difficult night, when Isabella refused to sleep no matter what they tried, Valeria found herself crying from sheer exhaustion in the hallway outside the nursery. Adrian emerged moments later, found her there, and simply held her while Isabella's cries continued in the background. "I don't know what she needs," Valeria sobbed. "I fed her, changed her, burped her, rocked her, and she's still crying. What if something's wrong? What if I'm a terrible mother?" "You're not a terrible mother. You're an exhausted mother, which is completely normal." Adrian wiped tears from her face. "Let me try something." He went back into the nursery, and Valeria heard his voice, that deep, commanding tone that made grown criminals nervous, speaking softly to their daughter. "Isabella Rose Vercelli, this is your father speaking. I know you're upset about something, and I wish I could understand exactly what you need. But here's the thing, Bambina. Your mother is exhausted, and she's been taking care of you all day. so I need you to work with me here." To Valeria's amazement, Isabella's cries quieted to whimpers. Adrian continued talking, his voice a low rumble that somehow seemed to soothe their daughter. "That's better. Now let's figure this out together. Are you hungry? No? Uncomfortable? Maybe you're just feeling a little overwhelmed. I get that. The world is very big and very new, and sometimes it all feels like too much." Valeria peeked into the nursery to find Adrian holding Isabella against his chest, one large hand supporting her tiny body, the other gently patting her back in a slow rhythm. And incredibly, Isabella was calming down, her cries fading to occasional hiccups. "How did you do that?" Valeria whispered. "I have no idea," Adrian admitted. "But I'm not moving until she's asleep." He stood there for another 20 minutes, swaying slowly, murmuring to Isabella until she finally surrendered to sleep. When he carefully placed her in the crib, both he and Valeria held their breath, waiting to see if she'd wake up screaming again. But Isabella slept on, peaceful and content, and her exhausted parents stumbled back to their own bed for a few precious hours of rest. As the weeks turned into months, they found their rhythm. Isabella grew from a tiny newborn into a chunky, bright-eyed baby who smiled when she saw her parents and laughed when Adrian made ridiculous faces. The townhouse filled with baby equipment and toys, the sophisticated adult space transforming into a home that was lived in and loved. Adrian's business transformation continued steadily. The legitimate operations he'd been building flourished, while the criminal enterprises were quietly phased out or transferred to others. It wasn't a clean break, that was impossible in his world, but it was a definite shift. He spent more time in boardrooms than backroom deals, more time with lawyers than enforcers. Marco became Isabella's unofficial godfather, his gruff exterior melting whenever he held the baby. He reported that the other families had accepted Adrian's transition without major pushback, understanding that a man with a family had different priorities than a man with nothing to lose. One evening, when Isabella was 6 months old, sitting up on her own and grabbing everything within reach, Adrian came home with an announcement. "I met with Victor Castellano today," he said, finding Valeria in the living room where she was playing with Isabella on the floor. Valeria's hands stilled on the toy she'd been shaking. "Victor? Dante's father?" "The same. He called and asked for a meeting. I almost said no, but Marco convinced me to at least hear what he had to say." Adrian sat down on the floor beside them, letting Isabella immediately grab for his tie. "Victor is dying, has maybe 2 months left, and he wanted to apologize for what Dante did, for the threat against you and Isabella." "Did you accept the apology?" "I told him that his son made a mistake that cost him everything, his territory, his operations, his future in New York. That was consequence enough." Adrian gently extracted his tie from Isabella's grip, only to have her grab his finger instead. "But I also told him that if any member of his family ever threatens mine again, the consequences will be permanent." "How did he take that?" "He said he understood, that he'd made similar threats when he was in my position, building his empire, protecting his family. He actually seemed—" Adrian paused, searching for the word. "Sad. Like he was looking at me and seeing what he used to be before the violence and power took everything that mattered." Valeria understood the implication. "You're afraid of becoming him." "Every day. I look at Isabella and I think about the world I'm leaving for her. The enemies I've made, the violence I've been part of, the darkness in my past that might touch her future." He picked up their daughter, holding her close. Victor's youngest son tried to kill his father's rival's family. That's the legacy of this life. Violence passing from generation to generation, children growing up to repeat their parents' mistakes. "But you're changing that," Valeria said firmly. "You're building something different for Isabella. Not just money and power, but actual businesses, foundations that help people. You're breaking the cycle." "I hope so." Adrian kissed Isabella's head, breathing in that perfect baby smell. "I want her to be proud of her father, not afraid of him, not ashamed of him. Proud." Isabella responded by grabbing Adrian's nose and squealing with delight, and the heavy conversation dissolved into laughter as their daughter demanded attention. The months continued to pass in the beautiful chaos of raising a child. Isabella hit every milestone with enthusiasm, rolling over, crawling, pulling herself up on furniture. She was a happy baby, quick to smile, curious about everything. She had Adrian's dark eyes, and Valeria's stubborn determination, a combination that suggested she would indeed rule the world someday. Valeria's body slowly returned to something resembling its pre-pregnancy state, though changed in ways both visible and invisible. The stretch marks Adrian had called perfect remained, silvery lines mapping the journey of creating life. Her relationship with her own body had transformed, less about how it looked and more about what it could do, what it had done. Her relationship with Adrian continued to deepen in ways she couldn't have imagined during those dark years of separation. They knew each other now, truly knew each other, had been tested by crisis and come through stronger. They still argued sometimes, about parenting decisions, about business choices, about whose turn it was to deal with a 3 a.m. diaper change. But the arguments never included the cold distance that had characterized their first years of marriage. They talked now, about everything. About Adrian's gradual transition away from criminal operations and the relationships he was building in legitimate business circles. About Valeria's desire to maybe go back to school, pursue the education degree she'd abandoned when they'd married. About whether they wanted more children, a question they both answered with maybe someday, while focusing on the perfect daughter they already had. On Isabella's first birthday, they threw a party at the townhouse that spilled from the living room into the garden. Friends and family filled their home, Sophie and Marco and Dr. Chen, and the people who'd become part of their extended family over the past year. Isabella sat in her high chair, wearing a ridiculous frilly dress Valeria had found, cake smeared across her face, shrieking with joy at all the attention. Adrian stood beside Valeria, his arm around her waist, watching their daughter destroy her birthday cake with enthusiastic determination. "This time last year, you were in labor," he said quietly, cursing at me between contractions. "I believe I told you this was all your fault and I was never letting you touch me again." "You did. Very specifically, multiple times," he smiled. "And yet, here we are." "Here we are," Valeria agreed, leaning into him. "With a 1-year-old who has your stubbornness and my lack of patience. We're in trouble when she's a teenager. We'll handle it together, just like we handle everything else." Later that night, after the guests had left and Isabella was asleep in her crib, exhausted from all the excitement, Adrian and Valeria stood in the nursery doorway watching their daughter sleep. "I've been thinking about something," Adrian said. "About what happens next, long term." "What do you mean?" "By the time Isabella is old enough to understand what I do, I want to be completely legitimate. No criminal operations, no questionable activities, just businesses that I can explain to her without shame." He turned to face Valeria. "Which means I need to accelerate the transition, make harder choices, probably burn some bridges with people who've been useful to me over the years." "That sounds dangerous." "Less dangerous than having Isabella grow up and discover her father runs a criminal empire." His voice was firm. "I'm 36 years old. I have maybe 20 years of active work left before I should probably retire. I want to spend those 20 years building something I can hand to her with pride, not guilt." Valeria considered this. "What would that look like?" "The Vercelli Foundation expanding, doing real good in communities that need it. The real estate portfolio growing through legitimate acquisitions. The security consulting firm serving corporations and wealthy families. The investment funds operating legally and ethically." He ran a hand through his hair. "It means walking away from probably 60% of my current operations, taking a massive financial hit, making enemies of people who've relied on those operations. But keeping your soul," Valeria finished, "and giving Isabella a father she can be proud of." "Exactly." She turned to face him fully. "Then do it. Whatever you need to do, however hard it is, do it. Because you're right. Isabella deserves to grow up knowing her father is someone who builds things, not destroys them. It's going to take years. There's no quick way to untangle everything. We have years." Valeria took his hand, "and we'll face them together, just like we've faced everything else." Over the next 3 years, Adrian systematically dismantled the criminal side of his empire. It was delicate, dangerous work. Convincing or forcing longtime associates to take over operations he was abandoning, negotiating treaties with rival families, ensuring that his withdrawal didn't create a power vacuum that would lead to violence. There were threats, of course, people who saw his transition as weakness, who tried to take advantage of what they perceived as vulnerability. But Adrian handled each challenge with the same ruthless intelligence that had built his empire in the first place, proving that going legitimate didn't mean going soft. The Vercelli Foundation grew into a significant force, funding education programs, supporting families in crisis, providing resources to communities devastated by the same violence Adrian had once participated in. It was his way of balancing the scales, of trying to do more good than the harm he'd caused over the years. Isabella grew from a toddler into a bright, energetic 4-year-old who talked constantly and asked questions about everything. She started attending a prestigious preschool where the other parents had no idea that the charming, attentive father at drop-off had once been one of New York's most feared crime bosses. She looked like both her parents, Adrian's dark eyes and hair, Valeria's bone structure and smile, but her personality was entirely her own, confident without being arrogant, curious without being reckless, kind but capable of standing up for herself. She adored her father and had him completely wrapped around her little finger, but she also respected her mother's firm boundaries. Valeria had gone back to school when Isabella turned 2, pursuing her teaching degree part-time while managing their home and occasionally helping with foundation work. It was exhausting but fulfilling, giving her an identity beyond wife and mother, allowing her to build toward her own future. Their marriage continued to strengthen through the years. They'd learned how to fight fairly, how to apologize sincerely, how to support each other through stress and exhaustion and the endless chaos of raising a child. The passion that had drawn them together in the beginning had matured into something deeper, partnership built on respect and trust, and the determination to keep choosing each other every single day. On their 7th wedding anniversary, Adrian surprised Valeria with a trip back to the Caribbean island where they'd spent their baby moon. Isabella stayed with Sophie for the weekend while they flew south to the private paradise where they'd reconnected years before. Walking on the beach at sunset, Valeria realized how much had changed since their first visit to this place. Then, she'd been pregnant and uncertain, tentatively rebuilding trust with a man who'd broken her heart. Now she was confident and secure, married to someone who'd proven his commitment through action, not just words. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked, his hand warm in hers. "How far we've come. How different everything is from those first terrible years. Do you ever regret it? Staying with me instead of leaving like you'd planned?" Valeria stopped walking, turned to face him. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the same colors that had surrounded them when he'd proposed on this beach years ago. "Not once," she said honestly. "It was hard, rebuilding what was broken. But Adrian, what we have now, this marriage, this family, this life we've built together, it's stronger than anything we could have had if we hadn't gone through all that pain. We earned this, we fought for it, and that makes it mean something." He pulled her close, kissed her with the kind of passion that still made her pulse race, even after 7 years together. "I love you. I loved you when I was too much of a coward to show it, and I love you now when I finally know how to do it right. I love you too, all of you, the darkness and the light, the crime boss and the businessman, the fierce protector and the gentle father, every part of you." They made love that night in the beach house, reconnecting in the way they'd learned to over the years, with honesty and passion and the deep familiarity of two people who knew each other's bodies as well as their hearts. Later, lying tangled together in the moonlight, Adrian's hand traced lazy patterns on her skin. "I want to tell you something," he said quietly. "Next month, I'm officially closing the last of the criminal operations. Everything that's left, the gambling, the protection rackets, the money laundering, it's all being transferred to neutral parties or shut down completely." Valeria propped herself up on her elbow to look at him. "Everything?" "Everything. By Isabella's 5th birthday, I'll be completely legitimate. No more shadows, no more illegal activities. Just the businesses and the foundation and the clean life we've been working toward. How does that feel?" "Terrifying," he smiled. "Also liberating. I've been building toward this for years, but actually doing it, actually walking away from the power and control I've had for so long, it's strange. I keep waiting to feel like I'm making a mistake." "And do you?" "No. Every time I see Isabella, every time I think about the life we're building, I know I'm making the right choice." He pulled Valeria back down against his chest. "My father spent his whole life accumulating power and died alone and bitter. I'd rather have less power and more life." They flew home the next day, refreshed and reconnected, ready to face whatever came next. Isabella greeted them with enthusiastic hugs and a detailed report of everything she'd done with Aunt Sophie, chattering nonstop while they unpacked. The transition Adrian had described happened over the following months with surprising smoothness. The criminal enterprises were transferred or closed, the legitimate businesses expanded, and slowly but surely the Vercelli name became associated with philanthropy and success rather than fear and violence. There were adjustments, of course. Adrian's income dropped initially without the illegal operations, though the legitimate businesses were profitable enough to maintain their lifestyle. Some old associates disappeared from their lives, replaced by new relationships built on legal foundations. The constant low-level danger that had characterized Adrian's world faded, replaced by ordinary concerns about school enrollment and business competition. Isabella's 5th birthday party was held in the townhouse garden, 50 children running wild while their parents socialized, and the birthday girl presided over everything like a tiny empress. Watching her daughter command attention and organize the other children into elaborate games, Valeria saw both herself and Adrian reflected. The determination, the natural leadership, the certainty about what she wanted. "She's something else," Sophie said, joining Valeria at the edge of the chaos. "She really is." Valeria smiled. "Sometimes I look at her and can't believe Adrian and I made something that perfect." "You made something perfect by figuring out your own mess first," Sophie corrected. "I'll never forget those first 2 years of your marriage. Watching you slowly disappear into loneliness nearly killed me. But look at you now. Happy, whole, thriving. It wasn't easy getting here. The best things never are." Sophie squeezed her hand. "But you fought for it. Both of you, and that's worth everything." That night, after the party was cleaned up and Isabella was asleep, clutching a new stuffed animal and wearing herself out from excitement, Adrian and Valeria collapsed on the sofa in their living room. "5 years old," Valeria said. "How is our baby already 5 years old?" "I have no idea. Time keeps moving faster." Adrian pulled her close. "Before we know it, she'll be in college." "Don't. I can't think about that yet." He laughed, then grew more serious. "I made the final transfer today. The last operation closed and documented. As of 5 p.m. this afternoon, I am officially, completely, 100% legitimate." Valeria sat up to look at him. "How does it feel?" "Lighter. Like I've been carrying weight I didn't realize was there and suddenly it's gone." He met her eyes. "I can look at Isabella now and know that everything I have, everything I'll leave to her someday, was earned through legal means. That's worth more than any empire built on violence." "I'm proud of you," Valeria said, "for making the hard choice, for changing, for becoming the man you wanted to be instead of staying the man you were. I couldn't have done it without you. Without the motivation of protecting our family, I would have stayed in that world forever." He kissed her softly. "You saved me, Valeria. From myself, from the darkness, from turning into my father." "We saved each other," she corrected. "I was disappearing into loneliness and you were drowning in fear. We pulled each other out." They sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the quiet sounds of their home, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the peaceful breathing of their sleeping daughter upstairs. This was what they'd fought for. Not perfection, not a life without problems, but a real partnership built on honesty and trust. A family that could face challenges together. A future built on legitimate foundations instead of criminal enterprises. The years continued to unfold in a rhythm of ordinary joy and occasional challenge. Isabella started elementary school and thrived, making friends easily and showing an aptitude for both academics and leadership. Adrian's legitimate businesses flourished, proving that he was just as skilled at legal empire building as he'd been at illegal operations. The foundation expanded its reach, touching lives in communities across the city and eventually across the country. Valeria completed her teaching degree and took a part-time position at a local school, finding fulfillment in shaping young minds the way she'd once dreamed of doing. She balanced work with family, occasionally helping with foundation projects, building a life that was rich and full without being overwhelming. Their marriage continued to deepen through shared experiences and challenges. They navigated Isabella's childhood together, presenting a united front on everything from bedtime negotiations to screen time limits. They supported each other's careers and dreams. They made time for each other despite busy schedules, protecting their relationship with the same fierce determination they brought to protecting their daughter. When Isabella turned 8, Valeria found out she was pregnant again, a surprise that sent both her and Adrian into a brief panic before settling into excitement. Isabella was thrilled at the prospect of being a big sister, immediately claiming the spare bedroom next to hers for the new baby. Their son, Michael Adrian Vercelli, was born on a clear autumn day, and if possible, he transformed Adrian even more completely than Isabella had. Holding his son for the first time, Adrian wept openly, overwhelmed by the second chance at fatherhood, by the family he'd almost destroyed through fear and now got to build through love. Isabella was a devoted big sister, reading to Michael and helping with his care with the same competence she brought to everything. The townhouse, already full of life, became even more chaotic and wonderful. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Adrian and Valeria stood in the garden of their home, watching Isabella push Michael on the swing set while the evening sun painted everything golden. 10 years, Valeria said softly. A decade. Best decade of my life, Adrian replied, even counting the terrible first 2 years, because those years taught us how to fight for each other. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd actually left? If I'd gone through with my escape plan? Every day. And every day I'm grateful you didn't, or that fate intervened with our daughter before you could. He turned to face her. I think about the man I was then, so convinced that pushing you away would keep you safe, so terrified of losing you that I nearly lost you anyway. And then I look at the man I am now, and I barely recognize him. You were always this man, Valeria said. You just needed the courage to show it. And you gave me that courage. As you and Isabella and Michael, you're the reason I became someone worth being. They watched their children play, Isabella's laughter ringing out as Michael squealed with delight. This was their legacy, not money or power or criminal empires, but two beautiful, loved children growing up in a home filled with honesty and affection. The next years brought the ordinary challenges of raising 2 children, managing careers, maintaining a marriage through the chaos of family life. There were disagreements and stresses, moments when exhaustion made everyone short-tempered, times when parenting felt overwhelming. But there was also joy. So much joy. First days of school and lost teeth and bedtime stories. Family dinners around the table in the townhouse dining room. Vacations to the Caribbean island that had become their family tradition. Quiet moments stolen between Adrian and Valeria, reminding each other why they'd fought so hard to build this life. Isabella grew into a confident, intelligent girl who wanted to change the world. Michael became a sweet, thoughtful boy who adored his big sister and showed early signs of his father's strategic mind. Both children knew they were loved unconditionally, knew that their parents were partners who respected each other, knew that family meant standing together through everything. Neither child knew the full truth about their father's past. That would come later, when they were old enough to understand the complexity of redemption and change. For now, they knew Adrian as a businessman who ran successful companies and a foundation that helped people, a father who showed up for every school event and read bedtime stories and taught them to be strong but kind. On Isabella's 13th birthday, Adrian found himself watching his daughter hold court at her party, surrounded by friends, completely at ease in her own skin. She looked so much like Valeria at that age, beautiful and confident and utterly herself. She's going to be fine, Valeria said, joining him. I can see you worrying about teenage years and boys and all the things that could go wrong, but Isabella is smart and strong. We raised her right. I know, I just remember being 13 and knowing everything and being completely wrong about most of it. Then we'll be here to help her navigate when she's wrong, the same way we navigate our own mistakes. Valeria slipped her hand into his. We're not perfect parents, but we're honest ones, and we love our children fiercely, and that's enough. Michael appeared at their side, tugging on Adrian's sleeve. Dad, can we go swimming tomorrow? Isabella says she'll teach me to dive. Of course we can, Adrian said, ruffling his son's hair. Anything you want. As Michael ran off to tell his sister, Valeria laughed. You're such a pushover with them. I know, I can't help it. They asked me for something, and I remember growing up with a father who was cold and distant and demanding, and I just want to give them everything he never gave me. As long as everything includes boundaries and discipline along with love and support. It does. I promise. I may be a pushover, but I'm not raising spoiled brats. They stood together, watching their children, surrounded by the life they'd built from broken pieces and second chances. The townhouse around them was filled with memories. First steps taken, words spoken, tears dried, laughter shared. Every room held a story of their family becoming itself. That night, long after the party ended and both children were asleep, Adrian and Valeria sat in their bedroom, the same room where they'd made love and fought and cried and laughed over 13 years of marriage. "Do you remember the night we met?" Adrian asked. "You served me coffee and made some smart remark about me looking too serious. And you asked when my shift ended, completely confident I'd say yes." Valeria smiled at the memory. "I thought you were arrogant." "I was arrogant. I was also completely smitten with you from the first moment. We've come a long way from that coffee shop." "We have." He pulled her close. "Through darkness and light, crisis and calm, mistakes and redemption. And I'd do it all again, every painful moment, because it led us here." "To a life neither of us could have imagined," Valeria agreed. "To a family we almost didn't get to have." "To each other," Adrian finished. "Against all odds, despite all my mistakes, we found our way to each other." They made love that night with the familiarity of 13 years together and the passion of two people who never stopped choosing each other. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Valeria felt the same completeness she'd discovered the night Isabella was born, the sense that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The years that followed brought Isabella's high school graduation, her acceptance to Columbia University, her transformation from girl to young woman who carried herself with confidence and purpose. Michael grew into a thoughtful teenager who played piano and volunteered at the Foundation's community programs. The townhouse saw celebrations and sorrows, victories and setbacks, the ordinary chaos of a family living fully. Adrian's businesses continued to thrive, his reputation as a savvy but ethical businessman growing. The Foundation became his true legacy, touching thousands of lives through education programs, family support services, and community development. He transformed from one of New York's most feared crime bosses into one of its most respected philanthropists, and nobody except those who'd known him before could reconcile the two identities. Valeria became a master teacher, beloved by students and respected by colleagues, finding ways to reach children who struggled the way she'd once struggled. She balanced work with family, occasionally writing articles about education policy, slowly building her own influence and impact. Their marriage weathered everything life threw at it: financial pressures when investments went wrong, health scares that reminded them of mortality, the natural tensions of raising teenagers. But they'd learned how to fight fairly, how to apologize sincerely, how to forgive completely. The foundation they'd built on honesty and trust held firm through every storm. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Adrian surprised Valeria with a renewal of their vows. Not a big ceremony, just family and close friends gathered in their garden, the same place where they'd watched their children play for 2 decades. Isabella and Michael stood beside them as Adrian took Valeria's hands and spoke words he'd written himself. 20 years ago, I married you thinking I knew what love was. I was wrong. Love isn't about protection through distance or sacrifice without communication. Love is showing up every day, even when it's hard. It's choosing honesty over comfort, partnership over control, growth over stagnation. His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. You taught me what real love looks like. You showed me that strength comes from vulnerability, that power comes from partnership. You gave me a family I didn't know I needed and a life I didn't know I deserved. For 20 years, you've been my partner, my conscience, my home, and I promise you 20 more, and 20 after that, for as long as we both live. Valeria's own vows were equally heartfelt, speaking of the journey they'd traveled together, the darkness they'd survived, the light they'd found. When they kissed, Isabella and Michael cheered, and their gathered friends applauded, celebrating not just an anniversary, but a marriage that had survived everything and emerged stronger. That night, alone in their bedroom after the celebration ended, Adrian and Valeria stood at the window looking out at the garden where their children had grown up. 20 years, Valeria said. We made it. We made it, Adrian agreed, through everything, and we're still making it. Do you ever wonder what your father would think, if he could see you now? Sometimes. I think he'd be confused by the choices I've made, the legitimacy, the family focus, the foundation helping people he would have exploited. But I also think maybe he'd be proud, in his own way. Proud that I built something that will outlast me, that I broke the cycle of violence he was trapped in. You broke more than one cycle, Valeria pointed out. You broke the cycle of loveless marriages, of distance and fear. Our children will grow up knowing that partnership and honesty are possible, that love can survive crisis. That's a legacy worth more than any empire. Because of you. Adrian turned to face her. I was on a path to becoming my father, powerful, feared, alone. You changed that trajectory. You loved me enough to demand better, to refuse to accept my excuses, to insist on real partnership. We changed each other, Valeria corrected. I was disappearing, becoming invisible. You helped me find my strength again, my voice, my purpose. They stood together in the comfortable silence of 2 decades shared, watching the city lights twinkle beyond their garden. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Isabella was applying to graduate schools. Michael was navigating his junior year of high school. The foundation was expanding into new territories. Life would continue in all its messy, beautiful complexity. But tonight was just for them. For celebrating 2 decades of marriage that had started in love, nearly died in fear, and been reborn in truth. For honoring the hard work of building a real partnership. For acknowledging the family they'd created and the life they'd built together. I love you, Adrian said simply. More today than yesterday, more tomorrow than today. I love you too, Valeria replied. Thank you for fighting for us, for changing when it would have been easier to stay the same, for becoming the man I always knew you could be. Thank you for not giving up on us, for staying when leaving would have been easier, for believing I could change when I didn't believe it myself. They went to bed wrapped around each other, 2 people who'd learned through hard experience that love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, day after day, choosing partnership over pride, honesty over comfort, growth over stagnation. It was about building something real, something lasting, something worth fighting for. And as they drifted off to sleep in the home they'd created, surrounded by evidence of the family they'd built, both Adrian and Valeria knew with absolute certainty that they'd made the right choice. They'd chosen each other. Through darkness and light, through crisis and calm, through every challenge life had thrown at them. And they would keep choosing each other, every single day, for all the years still to come. Because that was what love really meant. Not the passionate beginning or the dramatic gestures, but the quiet, daily decision to stand together, to be partners, to be honest, to be present, to be home.